intro video fixed up. All right, we are
you should
live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Evidence of Evolution stream. This is Evidence the Evolution Show, episode 9. My continued endeavor to shame and embarrass Kent Hovind and all other creationists. But today we're talking about something that I've been kind of dodging a little bit. The point of the show is, and everybody saying hi in the chat, anybody who talks in the chat, please make sure to follow the theme of the show, which is your favorite evidence of evolution. You got to share at least one or two pieces of your favorite evidences for evolution. Today, we're focusing on my favorite evidence of evolution, and that is all the evidence of evolution, which there is an ungodly amount of it. And so we're talking about that a little bit today, and I've made a presentation to help me get through all of it. So we're about to switch focus to that. If anybody wants to shout anything out, pause anything, add anything, just talk. We'll still be able to hear you. You just won't be on screen. So here we go. Evidence of evolution. Can everybody still hear me all right?
Yep, and we can see the presentation as well, Austin.
Good. So you can read everything. You can hear me talking. Good.
All good, yep.
All right, well, this is the evidence of evolution, according to me and the general scientific consensus of basically the entire world. Now, I feel like we need to start talking here because creationists are already lying about things I'm about to start telling you. They are going to tell you that no, it's not all the scientific consensus. It's not all the scientific, not everybody. I want to clarify that I've said all scientific societies. Now, there are probably some societies out there that reject evolution, but they're not scientific. Scientific society means something a little more specific, and it is to them that I'm referring when I say all the scientific consensus supports evolution. So here's the reality of things. Creationists think science is something other than what it is supposed to be, especially when it comes to things that contradict their Bible. When it comes to evolution, creationists try to say that evolutionary science is not science. It's not real science because you can't. It's not observable. You can't. It's not testable. They claim that basically, when they say that, what they mean is you can't repeat evolution in a lab. You can't make ancient primate evolve into a modern one inside of a laboratory, which that is correct, but that is not something we have to do to substantiate evolution. Because in reality, science is not just the things that you can do in a lab. It is also primarily a method of formulating and exploring quantifiable, falsifiable, possible solutions to unanswered questions. So when creationists debate evolution, they try and make it out like you can't possibly win the debate because you can't make an ancient mammal evolve into a rabbit inside of a laboratory, right? Which you can't do that, but you don't have to do that because what it really is that evolution is this quantifiable, falsifiable, plausible solution to an unanswered question about natural history. All kinds of unanswered questions about natural history. Like, why do we have vestigial features? Why do we have similar genomes to other mammals in nested hierarchies? Why do we have all of these endogenous retroviral insertions that match those nested hierarchies when you do those in comparison? Evolution is a quantifiable, falsifiable, plausible answer to all those questions, and it's an answer that fits virtually all the evidence creationists will say that's not good enough because you can't you can't turn a bacteria into not a bacteria, is basically what they are going to say in most cases, I think, which is not really how evolution works. Even us as humans, we are still just clumps of eukaryotes. Technically, we haven't changed kind at all, the way creationists define kind, which is they're very sneaky and subversive about it. But the fact is, in reality, there's not really a debate. All of the scientific societies accept that evolution is indeed a quantifiable, falsifiable, plausible solution to unanswered questions. All of the evidence supports it. All of the tests we've come up with continue to support it. It's continued to be a supported theory for the last 150 years. People way more intelligent than the average YouTube creationist have tried their very best to disprove it, and they haven't even gotten close. So that in science is what rewards something the status of being a theory, is when the whole scientific community knows about this theory. Everybody who cares to has tried their very best to refute it and failed. So it has remained supported, and we call it a supported hypothesis and therefore a theory. And theories, they continue to get developed. Other people get interested in them, and they decide they want to build onto it. And that's especially true when a theory is very useful to humans, which is exceptionally true about evolution. Evolution is profoundly useful to human beings. We've used it for medicine, agriculture, public health and safety, conservation, computer simulations, mathematics, philosophy, psychology, pharmacology, medicine. Everything that actually produces benefits to humans is based on evolution. So that's the scientific reality. And I mention it because there's very little reason anybody would ever need to know all the evidence for evolution. I have become interested in it because creationists lie about it on the internet. That is why I have decided to try and collect all of it. You don't really need to know all of it. Just being well schooled in one segment of it can probably score you some pretty decent jobs. It makes you more intelligent and educated. And I think one of the reasons I feel so motivated to get in the ring and butt heads with creationists over it is because I think they don't realize when they're denying evolution, they're denying virtually all of science. And I wanted to illustrate that. And that is basically what I mean when I say all the evidence of evolution. As a result of getting into arguments with these creationists, I've dived as deeply as possible into a couple of specific fields of science and as broadly as possible into just science itself, which it turns out there's hundreds, maybe thousands of fields of science. And I have found around 200 or so of them that support evolution fairly directly. And so that is what I mean when I say my favorite evidence of evolution is all the evidence of evolution. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about more specifically what that means. And it's a kind of tough question to answer. So I actually think it's almost easier to just divide it into the categories. And I have 14 categories here. We're going to try and touch on as much about these as we can before we move on to the many other slides I have about more specific things. So let's go back to slide 4 here and talk about the categories. So this might take a little while. I think it might behoove us if one of you guys, either Jeremy or Ian, if either of you guys could use a timer to help keep us on track so we don't spend too much time talking about any
I can
random.
do that. So tell me what time that you want me to kind of. I'll set the timer.
Let's give ourselves
and
20 minutes for the category slide here.
That's a good amount of time.
Sounds good. I'll do that right now. You just
Thank you, Ian.
all right. 20
Some of
minutes.
them, I think, like comparative anatomy and fossil record might need a lot though,
Yeah.
because comparative anatomy is awesome, and that's one of the ones that they always get just so miserably wrong.
Well, remember, this is just a category slide. There is a
Okay.
specific slide for comparative anatomy, embryology, and development.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we got the timer going,
Sounds good.
Ian.
I'm ready to press start when you're ready to go, mate.
Let's go. Press start.
Done.
Okay, so we've got these 14 categories of facts, evidence, fields of inquiry that support evolution. We're starting, and honestly, I kind of feel like some of the categories they overlap. Other categories can be folded into one of the other categories if you really needed to. I like this organization because it does show the broadness of how much a science supports evolution.
Absolutely.
So the first one, the foundational concepts and direct observations. And I think one of the best ways you could state this succinctly is just to say paleoscience, genetics, and applied evolutionary science. And what I mean by that is the fossil record, species genetic similarity, and repeatable speciation, because that is the core evidence. Those three things alone absolutely 100% support evolution. I think if a creationist asks you what is the evidence of evolution, I'm going to offer you a lot of things that you could say that are correct today. And that's one of them. When a creationist asks you, what is the evidence that supports evolution? Just say paleoscience, genetics, and
Oh yeah.
applied evolutionary
and my
science.
hairy legs. They can't explain why we have these leftover hairs. They just can't.
Yes, the vestigial features. That's a big part of it.
And
So
that's one they always love to talk about.
yes. Yeah. That's
Always.
category
Could
one.
be because of input. Sorry,
Category.
just a comment.
Oh, you're good.
No,
Category
go ahead.
two
Just,
is
I think
paleoscience,
it might be
and
delayed. Sorry.
paleoscience for sure is huge for evolution. I, having studied to do this presentation, I am more enraged than ever that Kent Hovind dares to say that there is no such thing as the geological column. What an outrageous, preposterous lie that is. It's I almost can't believe he has the gall to say it.
Well, it's as crazy as the fossil record that he, says was put down in a single flood.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's just ridiculous as far as I'm concerned.
That's true. He says there is no fossil record, and then he also tries to say there's a fossil record that supports the flood. It's a very weird instance of kettle logic. But paleoscience is huge for evolution, and I didn't realize just how many different kinds of paleosciences there are. We'll get more into that as we get deeper into the slides and whatnot. Because holy cow, they study a lot of ancient organisms.
That pollen, paleopologeny,
Paleopaleontology, yeah.
Paleontology. Yeah, that's a
Yes.
really cool subject, actually. Like when I was looking through there, I was trying to find good subjects to, just to kind of dig into.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Like, it's amazing how all the information that comes from, like the ice core samples and all the other types of science that goes along with them finding that pollen.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
It's very applicable to the modern age too, because pollen is one of the biggest environmental pollutants. It's one of the things that makes humans allergy sick more often than anything else. So it's still very
everywhere.
useful for us to know as much about pollen as we can. And the fact that pollen has existed for so long, botany I think is something I'm going to need to dive into more, because plants are so big for evolution. I really am learning that more and more all the time.
Hey,
Yeah,
Austin.
What's up, Ian?
Sorry, mate. So just for the audience, right? So love the categories, and I get there's going to be tons and tons of scientific disciplines underneath each of these ones. Now they seem they're very hard type sciences, so I just wanted to ask more the softer type sciences, and I kind of use the word soft not to mean like they're less important, but things like linguistics, things like archaeology, things like the studies of human migration. History, for example, like where would that kind of sit within these categories? Because I think all of those have evidence that basically disprove a young Earth.
I think all of those have been folded into this list of categories somewhere. Archaeology made it into the Paleosciences. Linguistics made it into computational systems and approaches. And I think the last one you said ended up in category 14.
Like human migration, for example, there's a big study on out of Africa, how long it took.
Oh yeah,
Different types of migratory paths, and they're all we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years. We're not talking about 6,000 years. So just wondering where that particular science would kind of sit in here.
That would be in category 10, the anthropology and human evolution category.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, in overall, that's one of the most powerful evidences for evolution, I think, is all the converging fields that also agree. That doesn't happen with a lot of other disciplines like it does with evolution, where you can have other fields that have anything whatsoever to do with it. But evolution does. A lot of fields are all in agreement with biology.
Yeah.
And Dave, the one thing I'd like to add to that one. So sorry, just the one thing I want to kind of add and to bolster what Dave is saying is that none of these studies of science depend on each other. So the fact that they come to a conclusion that proves or demonstrates an old Earth. So and I say that because when you speak to creationists, they always say things like, you need old time, or you need deep time for evolution to work, or you need this. It's like they think that we have to assume deep time first, as opposed to the other way where deep time is a result of the evidence that we can see. Does that kind of make sense? And all of these sciences show that the evidence shows that we need deep time, but it's not that we assume deep time first. So I just wanted to kind of bring that out and make that a little bit clearer.
And the thing with that also is that all of these fields can do it on their own. Like most of these fields can prove it in their own field while they prove it in other fields at the same time.
Right.
So
that's one of the things creationists always throw in, that through the evolutionary lens, or whatever wording they use, that somehow you're using evolution in biology to determine the age of a fossil or the age of a star or anything else. It has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it's just the fact that all these different lines of inquiry fit each other. It's the fact that if you were to take the date of a known object using radiometry and dendrochronology and all these other dating methods, you get the same answer. That's very convincing. That really strengthens the reliability of your method when it's that counter-dependent or
robust.
Intersectional. When it's that it's cross-confirmed by multiple different approaches to the problem, producing the same answers.
Yeah, they make it out like it's everybody's in on one thing together, but it's not that way at all. It's exactly the opposite. Scientists working on independent things all of a sudden realize, hey, you know what? This agrees with evolution. How about that? Yeah, it was the result of, it wasn't the intent that they set out to do.
And it's always a conspiracy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's
because
in
the background, guys, I was just asking our good creationist friend ChatGPT. So I know that a lot of creationists kind of rely on ChatGPT, but so I decided to use it as well. I just asked a simple question: what percentage of PhDs and research scientists are young Earth creationists? And it spat out an answer to me, which it's got a source. It gave me two answers of a 1991 Gallup poll and a 1997 Newsweek report. And both of them basically says that of So I'll read the one that's relevant. So of earth and life sciences, so the relevant sciences that creationists always love to talk about, geology, archaeology, all that kind of stuff. Yes, exactly. Only 0.15% of those sciences, of those PhDs or research scientists in earth and life sciences are young earth creationists. That's 0.15%. I mean, that just basically goes to show who has the scientific consensus. Of the people that are experts in studies in the field and are doing research in the field, only a 0.15% of them actually believe in the young earth.
And that number probably bottoms out when you ask, have they actually done anything, wrote any papers or anything like that? It probably drops right off. Yeah.
Well, the peer review.
I was going to say, I bet that number is still inflated because creationists have done this multiple times where they tried to get lists of all the experts and professionals who support them. And every time they do it, multiple people that they put on the list come out and say, I never agreed to this. My name should not be on this list.
There was actually a PhD person in astrophotography or astro something. I'm not sure what it was, but he got a Nobel Prize. And in his comments when he was talking about what he had discovered, he said something about how if it was a Christian, they would think that they had met God or that they had found evidence for God. And that is one of the quotes that I've seen the most just completely blown out. Like he was not saying that he found God. It was just, like a comparison to like, oh yeah, this is how big my discovery really is. And they just my brother actually was the one that showed me that, because he was trying to say, well, there's all kinds of Nobel Prize winners that have gotten it for creationism. And it's like, no, that was completely misrepresented. And it's like, that's what they love to do.
There's been a lot of Nobel Prize winners who are Christians, but nobody's won any Nobel Prizes for creationism.
They like to bring up that guy that worked on the MRI machine, that he's a creationist, but that has absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with the MRI machine proving creationism. So it's they just say, well, look, he wasn't the sole person that worked on it either. It was a team, but amongst the team. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you believe because they were working on an MRI machine.
Yeah, science is always science too. Like it's always the facts that it doesn't matter who wrote down the facts. When they're proven, they're proven. Yep. And they just can't use creationism to prove, that we came from a fistful of dirt.
Yeah. Yeah, they conflate it that somehow making an MRI machine proves creationism. And it doesn't.
About Dr. Sanford, John Sanford. So Doc, if you Google Dr. Sanford, he gives a pretty good history of his conversion to young earth creationism. He started off, believing in evolution. At a certain point in time in the 80s, he became an old earth creationist. And then in the early 90s, he became a young earth creationist. Now, if you hear people talk about Dr. Sanford, some creationists point to the fact that he invented the gene gun. Like, say, oh, we've got young earth creationists, PhDs, we've invented things that are important, like the gene gun. And then you check the dates. He invented the gene gun when he was an old earth creationist, 10 years before he became a young earth creationist. So I like to kind of use that as a bit of a tidbit. If they use that against me, I say, well, that's fine. He did invent the gene gun. He was good, very clever in his studies, but he did that before he believed in the young earth. And then after that, he invented nothing else.
It doesn't matter that they like to cite that Simon guy in England too, who makes gears, and he makes such great gears. Olympic bicyclists go to him, NASA goes to him, but again, he makes great gears. He's not proving young Earth creationism.
Is that when they try to compare that with there's a biological part in a gene or something that's like it spins like a gear and it can go in different directions.
The flagella motor.
And they try to use that as intelligent design, like that. See, that proves God right there. How could it not?
It's Behe and the rest like to use it for irreducibly complex, but it's easily debunked because you don't need all that complexity. All you need is any little thing that moves you in the water. It doesn't have to be as fancy as the evolved versions they're showing. It could be, just a little
flipper,
flap of skin or whatever. Yeah, anything that you could move in the water. Yeah.
And I think, Dave, in the Kitzmiller trial, where their intelligent design was actually a trial, what they showed was if you took out 1/3 of the genes that made up that flagellum motor, you could actually show that it was actually used by bacteria to inject toxins into other into cells. So it was not irreducible complex because you can remove 1/3 of the genes and it still had a function.
Still has a function, right?
Exactly. So it was not irreducible complex at all. So.
Yeah.
There's actually another part of some bacteria called cilia, which is very similar to a flagella, and you could easily see how one might adapt into the other.
Exactly what I pointed out. I play around with my microscope sometimes, and I get the pond water and stuff, and I look around, and I've found cilia that aren't doing a whole lot, but they're just got all these little hairs sticking out. And any little movement in the water sends them off this way or that way. Then all you need is a little more advance where you move the cilia. And now you're moving yourself without any of the complexity of the flagellum motor.
That's right.
Great point.
Complexity is nonsense. It doesn't really exist. I don't think I've ever seen an example of something that is actually truly irreducibly complex.
Yeah, the cilia, great example, Austin. Just point to the cilia, and there you go. You don't need the flagellum motor to move around.
And one could easily develop into the other. So, continuing on our list of categories, because I think we're running low on our 20 minutes here. We gave ourselves.
Well, I think we're covering a lot of it as we go, though. We've touched on a lot of it, so we're good to go. It'll all come together.
We'll get to it.
3 minutes,
I just want to get to the next one because this one is really big for me, is genetics, genomics, and molecular biology. The homogeny, the homologous features we have are really, really powerful at the microbiological level. We're all made up of the same stuff, the same nucleic acids, lipids, carbons, carbohydrates. It's all the same biological elements at the molecular level. It's
doesn't that prove we came from dirt?
Processes. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, sorry. Doesn't that prove that we come from dirt? A fistful of dirt? Since we got all those.
Well, I will say that physics applies to living systems as much as it applies to non-living systems. And that does produce a lot of interesting effects. There's a lot of things that look really similar to one another. Like the vascular system of a plant looks very much like the vascular system of an animal. The neural connectome of a brain looks a lot like a web of plasma in the cosmos. There's a lot of similarity in the terms of like shapes and structures because physics affects everything, including living systems. So the genetics, genomics, and molecular biology is huge. Evo-devo, category number 4, comparative anatomy and embryological and developmental biology. Those were both all kinds of things before, but there's like a new concentration that's emerging out of them called evo-devo. That's really fascinating, and it's really popular with extended evolutionary synthesis types. And extended evolutionary synthesis, that's one of the few areas of evolution where things are like, there's still problems that they're solving, still working on. I think it's interesting. I don't think it'll replace modern synthesis like a lot of really pro extended evolutionary synthesis people do think that it will. But that's just one of the areas where evolution is kind of weak and improving. The other big one that I can think of.
1 minute 20. 1 minute 20.
Okay. Yes. The other big one is the mutation load problem, and we'll talk about that, but that'll be later. For now, we're going to move on to category 5, biogeography. That one is huge for evolution because that basically biogeography has this thing called species distribution, and species distribution only makes sense through the lens of evolution. I'm so glad we have Ian here for this one because a lot of the points I was going to make about species distribution have to do with the fact that there's tons of species that only exist in Australia. And that's
Yeah.
huge for evolution.
I saw this thing the other day on Facebook, actually, where they showed a picture. There was kind of like a little quick video where they were showing this line that I think is in Eastern Asia, where like all the animals on one side are like, lions and bears and other animals like that. And on the other side of this kind of imaginary line, all the animals are reptiles and they're amphibian type animals at all, or like I think Australia was actually included in that part. I don't remember what it was actually called.
The line cuts across Indonesia, so I know the one you mean.
Yep.
I can't. It starts with W. So let me find out what that's called. I'll stick it in the chat. But you're right, there is a line. And just to add to what and you're right out of time, Austin, but just to add to what Austin was saying, when you look at these species that only appear in Australia, and you kind of track back in time, you see that there are fossil evidence for those species, the ancestors of those species. We can find them in, like South America. We can find them in Antarctica. And once again, that correlates exactly with where the continents were when they were together tens of millions of years ago as well. So that's another evidence of where you pick one sign, you look at, continental drift, you look at all, the movements of the continents, and you can kind of see they all fit together. So this deep time concept, even though we don't assume it, it's an output of basically all the sciences. It's necessary basically for all the sciences.
And that is precisely what biogeography is talking about.
Yeah, but they just deny
I think
it.
that's the Wilson line.
Yeah,
I think is what it was called.
I remember it started with W. So
yeah, I think it was the Wilson line.
I want to learn more about this. So when you do figure it out, please share it, because
it's really cool because it like talked about Komodo dragons and like kind of those animals that kind of like on the island of Komodo, and how this line actually defines a lot of the genetic speciation that happens, like the spread of the animals, but they just all seem to stop right there at that line. It was really interesting. It was like, wow, I was really shocked by it. I didn't think that anything like that
the
would
Wallace
be possible.
line. The Wallace line.
Wallace
line.
The Wallace
line. Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Because I think they would just surprising to me at all, because geography is super important for evolution. One of the main ways that evolution can happen is via geographic isolation. And I ask creationists about that all the time. And they almost always just kind of have to be like, yeah, they'll change.
Like the island of Florencia, where Homo florensis and the little mini elephants all lived because they all got secluded and shut off, and they kind of had to adapt.
Yeah.
You can't be a 15-ton animal when there's only 5 blades of grass to eat.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So
they have to stop trying to use science. I saw a Q&A with a guy, the Australian pastor or something he calls himself, and he was honest. He was asked, how do you explain kangaroos getting from Turkey to Australia? And he honestly said, I think God did it. I think God picked them up and put them in Australia. And I'm like, no, he's not Canahan. He's like the Australian preacher or pastor or someone. That's his channel name.
Oh, is it Ray Comfort,
he was
maybe?
No, he was nobody I know. I would know all those names. He's a real big old guy. He wears a hoodie and but he was being honest. And I will say, if you're going to believe that God did it, just say God did it. Say, I don't know, I'm not going to try to explain how the kangaroos got there. I'm just believe God picked them up off the ark and put them in Australia. And you know what? I of course, I think it's ridiculous, but I'll at least respect that position. Absolutely. Where he's putting it completely into the supernatural, and that's what he holds. The problem a lot of us have, a lot of us have with the creationists is they're trying to use science to prove their myths, and it doesn't work. That's when even other believers will dismiss creationists because they're starting to sound silly trying to explain the supernatural with science.
And the ark is the worst story for them. They try to bring it up constantly.
Oh, yeah.
That is the word there. I mean, that destroys everything. And no part of science ever can support any of that nonsense. There's never been
magic zoo boat is one of my favorite
exactly.
terms. Yeah.
There's never been two animals that have ever bounced back from being two individuals. I mean, just ask the white rhinos and animals that we have tried to assist in their coming back.
Adam and go back to Adam and Eve, two people.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah. Two people.
You're asking for trouble, right?
And they always don't want to talk about the genetic issues that come with incest. There's people in Kentucky that are blue because they've been banging for a long time and their family's been so isolated that now they're blue. And they don't like to talk about that. They don't want to pretend. They pretend like there's no issue that's going to happen from you plowing your great grandmother, or you know what I mean. Like it's just
right.
It seems so crazy to me. Like and
you see it in real time with the cheetahs. If they weren't out shooting them up with antibiotics and steroids, they'd already be gone.
Exactly. And cheetahs, when they migrated to Africa, they went in such a small population that when they got genetically isolated, that was just basically banging cousins. Yeah. And all of that genetic problems that come with that, and and they just but they can come back from two, because God gave them the perfect amount of genes for them to make every species out of in only 4,000 years. Like it's just so crazy to me that people actually believe that nonsense. That all of the biodiversity and all of the geographic positions of animals on our planet all came from the middle of Turkey when there was only two of them. Like
it's a crazy story.
Stay in the magic realm, and I will say, okay, you believe it was magic, but as soon as you say, John Stanford says, then it's like, no. See, now you're no longer staying in just the magic. You're trying to use science, and it just doesn't work.
Well, the geological record shows, or the fossil record shows, and it's like that doesn't show a damn thing for what's trying to help you. Like,
if you're going to teach a class about science and evolution, these 14 categories here, those are the only thing you need to teach. You do not need to teach the Bible or the Quran or any other religion. These cover it fine. Yep. That's ultimately the issue, is that creationists want the Bible taught instead of the foundational concepts, paleoscience, genetics, comparative anatomy, all that fun stuff.
And then it all goes into the peer review conspiracy.
Yeah.
That the only reason that they don't get anything peer reviewed is because as soon as they do, the evil evolutionists or scientists, all just showed down. When it's like, no, your science doesn't support it. That's why it gets shot down.
Yeah,
you can only have so much nonsense.
The crux of science. Science is not trying to prove anything. It's just trying to show that its ideas are supported or that they're not supported.
Exactly.
If they're not supported, they get rejected. If they are supported, they're considered a theory until somebody disproves it. And evolution won its theory status very hard. A lot of people were very resistant to the theory. And when paleoscience started proving it with transitional forms, and we started to understand where specific selectively bred species come from, that we changed species ourselves. We changed a species of grass into corn. We changed
the mustard seed into broccoli.
Yes. Yep. That has considered evolution thoroughly supported, and that hasn't changed in 150 years, and I doubt it ever will.
Well, it's the concept of, they like to use the survival of the fittest, but that's not really how evolution works. Evolution works on what's the best right now and just what's going to get us there. Like, when the moth turns black instead of white, it's not, it's just what's going to work now. And evolution isn't like some directed thing that they like to try to say, like intelligent design, where evolution is just they're trying to survive. Like it's all about what will work now. It's these changes don't happen completely like a tiger went from being orange to having stripes in the next day. It was over trial and error over 1 million or 2 years that those stripes started to develop, and then it was more effective. Like they try to say, oh yeah, it's just it just happens. All this, it just seems ridiculous.
It's funny that you bring that up, Jeremy. Did you know that there is a Bible story about how certain animals got their stripes and spots?
Is there
Did
really?
anybody else know about this
Well, I know the striped
Yeah, I
sticks,
know
like
that. Yeah,
cows banging in front of a
that's the
striped
one.
stick or whatever.
Yeah.
yeah. But then
All
I'm
right.
supposed to
Is
take
that what happened in
seriously.
Kentucky, Jeremy? Is that what happened? It was in front of some balloon?
That must have been how tigers got their stripes. I'm gonna have to start using that. Like,
It's honestly at the level of thinking all chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
Brown cows. Yeah.
yep.
And that's the thing. When you're going to try and give these deep philosophical arguments for God, and then in the next sentence you're going to talk about a magic zoo boat, in my eyes and in my ears, you lose all credibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because again, if you're going to have your beliefs, I understand people have beliefs. Have your beliefs, but we
Don't
call them out
science.
we call them out as liars, and we're not talking about the people they've deceived or anything like that. We're talking about the people at the top that know better. I was just commenting on a Jason Lyle thing earlier, and the first thing he says is, they think this Big Bang was an explosion and then it just made everything, and it's like, you're lying. You're an astrophysicist. That's not what the Big Bang is, right?
Yeah. Yep. When going back to a tiger, I learned a while back that the dots on their ears in the back are so that their predators would think that they were looking at them, kind of the same as a cobra.
Yeah. Fake eyes.
And that makes you wonder, what was trying to hunt a tiger? That something that was trying to eat something big enough that, like a Siberian tiger, where that pattern had to evolve, through the millions of years so that they could, stay alive. It makes you wonder, wow, what kind of animal was really chasing a tiger?
So can you guys see the words on this slide? We've moved on to the first actual meat and potatoes slide, the foundational concepts and direct observations. Is that legible for y'all?
I can see it on my big screen. I don't know about folks that have a smaller screen.
Yeah, I'm on my phone, so I can't really see it, but I can catch on.
Yeah. And Austin, would you like me to start the timer for this one as well? Do you want me to start the timer again?
Yes, and these we can do a shorter timer on. I would say we'll do a 5-minute timer for ones that are only one slide, and we'll do a 5 to 10 minute timer. We'll just do 5-minute time. 5-minute timer.
5 minutes. So knowing it's you, Austin, and since we've got Dave, it's 5 minutes plus or minus 20. Done.
You've
been watching Saturday Night at the Atheist, haven't you?
I did.
So this slide is specifically dedicated to the foundational concepts and direct observations. And I think this is the most important one. This is the one that everybody needs to know about, because this is the cornerstone kind of stuff. We're talking about fossils in paleoscience, and we're talking about genetic similarity that allows us to refine phylogeny, and we're talking about observational evolution, the fact that we have experiments now that are repeatable, where we can reproduce speciation, we can reproduce incipient sexual separation in certain populations of organisms. So the paleoscience side of things I think that is a really strong argument against intelligent design, and
could you repeat what that was, Austin? I didn't quite catch it. Inceptual relation or something you said?
I'm not sure.
One of the first couple.
We're talking about paleoscience, genetic similarity, and observable speciation. Oh, are you talking? Oh, incipient sexual separation.
Yeah, could you explain that? I don't understand what that is, and other folks might not either.
Yeah, I definitely do.
in the species concept, there are you can find specific exceptions where things that we would typically define as not the same species are in fact interfertile, like lions
Okay.
and tigers.
Like a ring species?
Yes. So
Okay. Okay.
There's a lot of
incipient
squirrels like
sexual
that.
separation is something that is observable. We can perceive it happening within human lifespans in species of organisms with very fast generation times. And it was specifically discovered by Diane Dodd in an experiment she did with Drosophila melanogaster, fruit flies. She took what was once a single population of fruit flies, and she geographically isolated part of the population away from the other population, and she altered the food sources in the
Like
isolated population's environment.
the
And
London mosquitoes
yes, very
in the
similar.
subway.
That is an example of a natural observation. She was
Oh, this
able
was one she
to
made.
form an experiment that's repeatable that produced the same, what is essentially speciation, Dave. That is what
Okay.
incipient sexual separation is. It's
Okay.
where technically they probably are still genetically compatible, but they won't select each other as mates because they look too different.
Right.
Sexually,
because of the isolation to a
Is
different
they
environment.
change
that like the
size,
Okay.
they
squirrels in the
change
Grand Canyon
appearance
also?
slightly. It's like the fact that even though a Great Dane and a Chihuahua are technically the same species, there's no way those two are actually going to mate together. They will not select one another as
Have
a
you read the Kama
optimal mate.
Sutra? There may be a way.
There may be with the right bend and
Yeah, but
It's
I
the
get you.
start
Yeah.
of speciation. It's the stage of it where we are capable of observing it. So it
well,
helps substantiate the larger trend that we see in paleoscience. We can see how speciation can occur, and then all of that adaptation can add up. It can add up to new species, and it can add up to uh, an overall increase in biodiversity.
yeah, I really
And
think
that
that
is
the
ultimately what the
mosquitoes is a
foundational
great
concepts are about.
comparison for that study,
Absolutely.
because we can see it actually happen in real life and
Yes.
we can see it happen in the lab.
Yes.
So we can see it happening in nature, naturally selective in nature, and we can also reproduce it in a lab where it shows, okay, this is exactly what happened in nature. I think that's awesome. That's a great comparison. Like that.
100%. It is truly absurd. It is perverse to say that we have not proved that selection and mutation can produce all the diversity we see around us.
Yeah.
We have absolutely demonstrated
Because
that
even
the
those
idea
mosquitoes
that
change what
selection
they
and
eat and all
mutation,
kinds of stuff.
yes, precisely. Yes, so these are the foundational concepts. And I think most reasonable people would be convinced here. But unfortunately, I think when it
Yeah.
comes to creationists, a
You
lot
know,
of the time we're not dealing with the reasonable person.
and also another like thing is that we can see like pipefish and seahorses. How this is kind of more paleo-ish, but how we know that the seahorse, its living ancestor, like what it evolved from, is still alive. The pipefish are still there, and we can see how they have changed over however long it took. But I've always thought about that as something really cool, where you can actually see the living ancestors of another animal now that's here,
Yes,
and they changed environment, everything that evolution would suggest would happen happened, and they both of these independent species are still here.
a couple
Like,
of my sources talk about that. That
yeah,
I
like
did
I
not
think it's really
understand
cool.
that was the actual fact of the matter. So that's super fascinating. Well, wow, that is really cool, actually. I should look
Like
more
I
into
think
that
it's awesome.
specifically.
Like, because we can see the difference. We can see the difference in what happened in their evolution in real time.
So
Like, and that's observed.
that would be part of paleoscience. I think that's going to be part of slide 7 here. Paleoichthyology. the study of fossil fishies.
Fossil fishies.
Yeah, that one is really big for evolution. Paleoscience in general is super huge for evolution. There's so many different types of ancient organisms we've studied now with paleoscience. We've studied mammals. We've studied epidemiology and pathology. We've studied plants, like
And the pollen.
paleobotany.
I was going to say
Huge.
that the pollen actually is another way that
Yeah.
the sciences overlap, because we
Yes.
see the fossils that are carrying the certain types of pollen in their stomachs, or they were fossilized with this pollen.
More
So,
independent verification, indeed.
exactly,
It's
overlapping.
independent verification out the wazoo in here. It's overwhelming
Absolutely.
how independently verified all these things are. One of my favorite ones here on the paleo slide, I really like anthropology, don't get me wrong. I want to learn more about it. But I really like the paleopathology, the paleovirology aspect of it, because that is where ERVs come from. And I know that's one of Ian's favorite things.
Yes.
ERVs are essentially the remnants of paleoviruses, right? They're just genetic fossils of paleoviruses. Do I have that correct, Ian?
Yep. Perfect. Hey, Austin, I decided I'm not going to keep you the time because I find the conversation very free-flowing and I like the discussion. So unless you disagree, I'll kind of let the time be more fluid.
Well, it's fine. Just do try and every now and then be like, okay, we've been on this one for a while.
I'll say some if you're rambling too much.
Okay.
Ian, you also like the AIUs or something, isn't that what they are?
I like junk DNA. So junk DNA, ERVs kind of sit in there, ALUs, both the sign and line, they all sit in there. Everyone talks about protein coding as being hierarchical and basically you can show common descent. But if you look at the non-protein, so the bulk of the DNA, you'll see that there are so many similarities that you can map phylogenetically. I can't even pronounce that word. You can map and show common ancestry from. I like that because creation will say that there's no such thing as junk DNA. So whether or not there is such a thing as junk DNA or not, they have to explain why. If we measure just junk DNA between humans and chimps, humans and gorillas, humans and rats, humans and any basal form of mammals, they will show a declining common ancestry. So that kind of makes sense. So I like it because it's the bulk of the DNA, and you can't argue against that, and it does nothing.
So they can do knockout tests for.
That's
Erica
right.
actually talks about
everything in the genome was created by God and it has some function. Well, here's a bunch of your genome that does not have function, and yet why are they so similar between a human and chimp? Less so between human and gorilla. Do you get what I mean? So I like it because they can't argue against it. They can't use the whole everything is functional because clearly they're not. And did God then create that not working? You get what I mean? So to me it's a slam dunk against creationism.
Yeah, because Erica talks about the knockout tests that they've done on mice, where they've knocked out
50% of the mice.
50 or 40, and that little mouse still does his thing, and he still moves on and has a happy little family and goes along like nothing ever happened. And well, it seems like there was a lot of junk there. Like it seems like that some of that wasn't necessary. But
it is my view that paleontology and genetics, paleosciences and molecular biology, they are super strong substantiations of evolution, and that makes them very great. But they also really strongly refute intelligent design, because paleoscience shows that if there was an intelligent designer, then he did something very bizarre. He designed millions, maybe billions of organisms just for 99.9% of them to end up in the scrap bin. That's what paleontology shows us. And then genetics shows us
that's one of my
all these sequences that there's no reason for them to exist unless you're thinking that they were cobbled together randomly to an extent through chemical processes, and that eventually became biological processes.
That's my argument against creationists. I was like, okay, you're running a company that makes everything, but your engineers you hire have a 99.9% failure rate.
Yeah.
Would you keep them on the payroll? You know? No, I don't think so. Yeah.
You know, and ERVs also is one that the creationists love to like try to act like don't matter. Like, but you know, I know we're going to talk about it later with human evolution, but you know, when it comes to the ERVs in our genetics, it's funny how we share them all with bonobos and chimpanzees up until the second and third fusion of the chromosomes, and then all of a sudden they change, and now we have our own independent ERVs that are in our genome, and somehow we're not related, or there was no type of evolution that was involved while it changed. Like for some reason they just can't get past that.
And they're at it again. AIG just put out a video saying, see, we were right all the time. We're not related to chimpanzees because they found a study that was looking at a segment of the genome that was more than 85% or whatever. But that the overall, though, doesn't change those numbers, and that's what they leave out all the time.
Yeah, they don't talk about the blast comparison that shows that we're 98% compared. And then they try to, they'll say, well, lions and tigers, they're the same kind, they're, everything, blah, blah, blah. They're completely related, even though their genome only shows that they're like 76 or 77% related. Well, when you compare us with a chimpanzee, it's 98. Even if you go with their number, it's 85%, and that's still more than a lion and tiger. And a lion and tiger look very similar, but yet, they'll accept their relationship, but not the relationship between us, even though it's way higher than a tiger or a lion.
Dr. Joel had a great video the other day. Everybody should check it out. It was just a short one, but he pointed out that they have a big problem with a 15% difference. However, he said there are humans that can have up to a 10% difference.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And nobody would deny that that they aren't all humans.
Yeah.
So if you can accept a 10% difference, even if it is a 15% difference, that's really not that much. That's only 5% difference if you're going to, again, compare with the other great apes. So, and again, the other great apes can be so much, I don't know what the number is offhand, but they can have that genetic diversity as well. So let's say they're 10% as well. So now you're taking your 15% number is really only 5%. And yeah, they completely leave out the differences species have within themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Like when they compare, a chimpanzee with a gorilla, I don't know exactly what the numbers are either, but I know that there's a big difference between the genetic similarity between a gorilla and a chimpanzee or a bonobo. But when you compare us to them, we're way more similar than we are to a great ape or to a gorilla. We're all still apes, but we've got that. And then orangutans, I think, have the furthest away from us. Like, I'm pretty sure that they're...
Sorry, go ahead, finish up.
Oh, no, I'm pretty sure that orangutans are like the furthest genetic relationship between the rest of the great apes, and they still consider them great apes. They still consider them primates.
Yes, that is part of what I like about it. So it's not only do humans have this incredible similarity to chimps and gorillas, there's the whole nested hierarchy aspect of things, and that ties in with endogenous retroviruses. The way taxonomy was constructed was Linnaeus was like, Aristotelian biology is expanding. We need a way to sort this ever-growing list of living organisms that we need to study. So he created a version of taxonomy that's based on heuristic morphology, just looking at things and saying, okay, this thing has 4 limbs, it walks in a prostrate fashion, it has a spine and a vertebral column, all that fun stuff, and creating groups based on that. And then hundreds of years later, we get this new technique, this new field of science called genetics, and we can compare the genomes and it ends up, when we start comparing genomes, like 95% of that heuristic morphology-based taxonomy was right, is what the genetic comparisons show us. And it also shows us, in some instances, where it was wrong, which is big enough on its own. But it not only shows us, in some instances, where it was wrong, it shows us what the correct answer is. Like with the clade of organisms called the clade Afrotheria, that include things like the golden mole and the golden shrew, a mole and a shrew that aren't actually a true mole or a true shrew. They're more closely related to elephants than they are to true moles and true shrews. And
I saw that before. That's wild. Yeah.
Tell us that. It's really, really strong confidence that this understanding is capable of producing when it corrects itself when new evidence is found like that, and it's getting better all the time.
Yeah, but a 5-year-old could tell they're related. They look exactly the same. And it's like, yeah, it is not. It's related to an elephant, so it's just completely wild. Yeah,
it's more related. They're more related to each other than any non-mammal would be.
Yeah,
but that exist in that same nested hierarchy that taxonomy is all
and
about.
That's convergent evolution, isn't it? Where different species end up kind of looking the same because of the environment or the food or whatever is in.
It's a combination of factors. Yes, Dave. You can end up with convergent evolution depending on what kind of environment you're in. So, like for instance, one of the more common environments you need for a kind of convergent evolution to occur is a grassy plain, an open plain. There's a lot of types of convergent evolution that can occur on populations of organisms that migrate to open plain environments. Like for instance,
is that kind of like how a hyena is kind of closer related to cats than it is dogs?
Yes, that's part of it. The one I was going to mention is the fact that there's no other species of kangaroos anywhere else in the world besides Australia, but there are a few interesting species of mouse and other rodents that have adapted kangaroo-like features. They have almost like kangaroo-like back legs, and they hop around.
We have those in Maine.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be an example of convergent evolution. Another big one is wings.
I was going to ask if bats are included in that with birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, bats and birds and insects and even the so-called flying squirrels and flying snakes and flying fish that just kind of spread themselves out so that they can jump farther, basically. Or fall farther, however you want to look at it.
Yeah, locomotion, being able to move, that's a big thing.
And that shows too, if you just get a flap of skin like a squirrel, well, see, look at, now you can make it, it's not really flying, it's more of a longer fall, but you can stay from tree to tree, and then why can't it get a little more advanced, and become wings, and and I just heard too about birds. They've discovered you don't have to fly to be advantageous to have wings, because some baby birds can flap their little wings so hard it gives them enough downforce that they can vertically climb back up a tree.
Oh wow!
I didn't know that.
Well, that makes sense.
So that's a great that's a great advantage. Or just going uphill away from a predator, you don't have to fly. If you're just flapping those things, it gives you downforce. So
with pheasants and turkeys that aren't actually able to fly,
right?
But they can kind of hop and scoot themselves, a couple 20 or 30 feet down the road, and prevent that bobcat or whatever's trying to eat them from eating them.
Yeah. So the idea that they were trying. Go ahead, Ian.
Sorry, man. I was just sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's
no, go ahead.
Delay. I apologize, but
sorry.
No, don't they actually say that feathers evolve from previous uses, such as keeping the clutch warm or display that kind of stuff? Anyway, so presumably what you're saying around is that transitional step to full flight, which I think that makes perfect sense. But even before that, it was there to keep the young warm or sexual threat and all that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Archaeopteryx, I don't think they say could have actually flown.
It said it could have fly very well. I think.
Yeah, he was just kind of a glider.
Yeah, that's like when they say what good is half a wing? Well, there's a lot of uses for half a wing because again, if it gives you downforce and you can stay one step ahead of the wolf or whatever is trying to eat you, that's all you needed. You didn't have to fly. It just became how it worked out.
And that's another example of evolution just making it work.
Yeah.
Where it's just
saving your
what
rear
works
end.
Best for right now. Like
saving your rear end for another day. That's right.
So that you can have babies and they can do it too.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, you guys, the evolution of function is a huge thing. And I think you and one of the people in the side chat were talking about it, weren't they, Ian? The nylonate function evolution.
Oh, yeah.
That is
an like a little something that eats nylon or something now that it adapted to be able to eat nylon?
Yes, it was an example of a new function of a protein evolving. Yeah, here we go. The nylonate bacteria.
Yeah, they've got something they just discovered too that's trying to digest the plastics because we've got so many microplastics.
Yeah,
there's some bacteria or something that they've found it down in the ocean there, and I don't know if it's fully digesting it, but it's trying to eat it.
That's pretty cool, as sad as it is. Like, as we've completely trashed the environment enough that now we have things that have to clean it up for us.
It might take
what you mean, Jeremy, when you say that's pretty cool, as sad as it is, because like the fact that we might be able to genetically engineer some kind of super lichen that will process environmental contaminants, possibly even radioactive ones, super duper cool. Should we even have to do that instead of just being responsible?
Maybe clean up and take care of things a little better.
Energy, maybe not.
Don't dump it in the ocean in the first place, but
I mean, that's usually helpful,
It shows the powerful force of an environment, though, that if you dump whatever all over the place, there's going to be a drive to eat it or use it somehow, like calcium to make a shell and stuff like that.
Yes,
you use what you got. Yeah,
there is a slide that's all about the ecosystem, and that's a big part of evolution. Before we move on from this slide, though, I want to point out at least two parts of it. I want to point out the molecular evolution part up at the top and the population genetics part at the bottom. The molecular evolution one, that one's really cool to me. That is like that is part of a big part of what the extended evolutionary synthesis crowd is arguing in favor of, because typically we think of natural selection as happening at the population and the species level. This might imply actually that natural selection happens at the microbiological level too, that there's like developmental biases, that there is a form of selection that is selecting specific gene sequences and specific microbiological structures, the most successful ones, to go on and reproduce. And I think it's got some. I like it. I like it.
That's super interesting.
Yeah,
I mean that is really cool if that's what's going on. Like,
there could also be a type of selection going on with abiogenesis too.
Yes,
some kind of a selective thing going on. Yeah.
That's one that they like to.
This is what Eugene Koonin is all about. He wrote a phenomenal textbook about this called Sequence Function Evolution. It's all about molecular evolution and allelic genealogies and all kinds of super fascinating potential new mechanisms for the creation of novel traits and novel features and structures and organizations. Really fascinating. And then
that's abiogenesis, is one that they like to, something came from nothing. But it's like, why is it so hard to believe that natural chemicals are going to arise, and then eventually those chemical reactions are going to cause something to happen? Like, they just can't understand that. Oh, it came from nothing. And blah, blah. Like Kent likes to say, it was a pool or a cesspool or whatever that, a sludge or whatever that turned into. It's just It's like, how is it so hard to understand that natural, chemical reactions happen around us all the time? Our bodies are full of chemical reactions that happen all the time. Why
I
is it
think
so
life
hard to
basically just is a chemical reaction.
exactly like it's
Yeah.
one chemical reacting to something else? Why is it so hard to think that maybe, those two chemicals just turned into a protein, turned into RNA, then boom, we have a cell, and now we've got DNA. It's not really that hard. I mean, what always gets them is the deep time aspect of it. That it's
That
so
is part of it. There's kind of an almost anthropocentric way of thinking about it. I think one of the really interesting things is the fact that you don't need a plant for photosynthesis to occur. Photosynthesis can happen even without a plant cell to cause it to happen within it. As long as you can get light and water and carbon dioxide, you can cause the photosynthetic reaction to occur. So the metabolic processes that become life can occur without life. So the idea that the metabolic processes exist and then eventually physical systems emerge that make use of those metabolic processes, it seems very intuitive to me. But I wanted to talk about the population genetics one a little bit because this is where a lot of the math of evolution comes in. When I say that math supports evolution, a bit population genetics is a huge portion of what I'm talking about because population genetics has allowed us to create mathematical formulas for evolutionary concepts. Like population genetics is precisely what tells us what a very subtly deleterious mutation is. And if you know what the mutation load paradox is, you understand why that's important and how the math of that is one of the areas where evolution continues to push the envelope and improve. Does everybody who knows what the mutation load paradox is? Am I the only one?
maybe I'm. Once you explain it, I might understand it. Like you use a lot of big words that like I don't quite know her until you start explaining it, and then it's like, oh, I've heard that before. So
Okay, so the mutation load paradox, we understand what happens when a trait is negative, right? When a trait is harmful, selection impacts it. If you have a trait that makes you less likely to survive, makes you less likely to reproduce, selection weeds that trait out because you reproduce less and you die quicker, right?
yeah,
But what happens if you have a trait that's subtly deleterious but doesn't actually have? There's a mathematical formula for the level of effect, the level of harmful a mutation needs to be in order to be considered a very slightly deleterious mutation. And what that means is if you have a very slightly deleterious mutation, it isn't removed by natural selection. Natural selection won't really impact it as much, which means they'll accumulate. The more generations you have, the more of them you'll have in your genome. And it's true, we humans probably have about anywhere from 10 to 100 very subtly deleterious mutations inside of each and every one of us. It was a foundational paper in 1995 that kind of coined and introduced the problem. And it did so by asking the question, why aren't we dead 100 times over from these accumulations of very subtly
the
deleterious
de-evolution that
mutations?
creationists like to talk about.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
devolving.
yes. That's how the creationists started kind of misrepresenting it. But what it really means is we're trying to figure out how that works mathematically and logically. And I think we have some pretty good answers, which is that it depends on what the deleterious mutation is and how it's deleterious. And it depends on what the other types of parallel deleterious mutations you have. Because yes, we have like 10 to 100 very subtly deleterious mutations, but most of them do unrelated things. Like one might make your skin a little clammier, one makes your 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 lungs a little smaller. Another makes your hair a little thinner. It doesn't really have, they don't have
An effect,
compounding
but
effects. But if multiple ones did, like if instead of all those different kinds of ones, you had several ones that one makes your lungs smaller, one makes your trachea more likely to constrict, one makes your blood less able to absorb oxygen, you develop now what could potentially be a lethal mutation from several very slightly deleterious mutations. And at that point, selection would then start impacting things. But generally, this is what we refer to as the mutation load paradox, and it's one of those areas where evolution is still weak and still trying to solve things. So I hope I
that's
explained that in a way you can understand.
that's kind of like when they say that no positive mutations ever happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, and that a positive mutation would be 10 billion trillion chance of nothing that would never happen. But they don't like to think about that mutation isn't happening always in one gene. That it's a multitude of genes that are being bombarded by whatever is causing that mutation to be positive or negative. So
That is part of our explanation for how it works too. We consider the fact that beneficial mutations are possible. That really helps undermine the impact of cumulative, very subtly deleterious mutations.
so if there's 10 bad ones and then all of a sudden there's one good one that kind of cancels out those 10 bad ones,
Kind of.
then it's kind of a push.
Yeah. But
That
that's
makes a lot
one
of
of the
sense.
areas that we're still trying to solve. And honestly, I would expect some of those to exist. They exist in every science.
Yeah.
Like conventional physics and astrophysics has dark matter and other things that they haven't been able to solve yet. And it is those problems that allow us to continue to improve science. So I'm actually really excited by the mutation paradox. I find it super interesting. I was just talking with my son about it all last night. He finds it really interesting too. He's starting to get
That's
into this
cool.
kind of stuff.
Hey, Austin, though. So the way I look at it is this: the scientists say most mutations are basically negligible, have negligible impact. So that's
Yes,
great, right? But
correct.
once there is a mutation that has a somewhat negative impact, wouldn't you think that natural selection would just root out the population? So if it has a massively negative impact within a generation, it's gone because obviously it's not gonna obviously pass its that genetic mutation on. But if it has progressively less and less negative impacts, it would just be slow in terms of weeding that genetic mutation out of the population. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
So I kind of
Yes.
see that where it only has a negligible impact, it sticks around. That's fine, no problems there. It doesn't impact the fitness of the organism at all. But where it has a negative impact, it'll just take some time. But it should be weeded out of the population over time anyway.
It's a possible solution. I take into account the fact too that it is very easy for what is called a very subtly deleterious mutation to become a neutral mutation. That in most,
Yeah,
like you said, most mutations are neutral mutations. It's
yeah.
more
The
likely
only
that
factor
a very subtly
exactly.
deleterious mutation will remain a very subtly deleterious mutation the larger the population is. So we have a very large population and a very large genome. So we are especially in what's called the danger zone when you calculate the mutation load paradox using populational genetical math.
Is
And
that because it can spread
it's
faster through our population than it would from like rats
yes,
or?
right. Yes. And I think not only is it very plausible and achievable for a very subtly deleterious mutation to become a neutral mutation, I think it's also possible for a very subtly deleterious mutation to become a positive mutation. And one of my favorite examples of that is sickle cell. Sickle cell anemia is kind
Yeah,
of both at the same time. It is a very subtly deleterious mutation, but
but
it
it fights
also
malaria.
is a slightly beneficial mutation at the
Yeah.
exact same time because it can keep people from dying from malaria.
There was
One of those
there was also
seesaws. Yeah.
there's also that gene. Aaron Raw talks about it a lot. That helps certain people in Europe or European descent from getting HIV.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that was something that happened during the plague. That maybe that was a way that their bodies used to fight off the plague.
I heard it was something we got from the Neanderthals that helped fight off certain things too, and that we owe our survival to something we got from a mutation from a Neanderthal to help keep us. Yeah, that, like they said, there's always a certain group of people that don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And
no matter
and
what
that's no matter what, there's always a certain amount. Now it might wipe out almost all the rest. And it's come close to doing it several times.
Yeah,
but
did the human population go down to like 60,000 or something? Like,
we've been in danger a few times. Yeah,
a few times.
So
that's amazing.
It's one of those things where it's clear when you look out into nature that the paradox isn't a problem. We're not dying 100 times over. It's interesting because it demonstrates that clearly there's some issue, some way in which our conceptualization of the mechanisms can be refined so that this paradox is explained away or it makes sense, which I think it does.
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to add to what Dave was saying when he mentioned about the Neanderthal genes. So there's a group of people, I think it's in Tibet. It could be Tibetans, but people kind of live in more high altitude kind of places, and they've tracked down the gene that helped them kind of adapt to these low oxygen, high altitude places to be found in basically Denisovan's DNA. So it seems that when at some stage Homo sapiens had interbred with the Denisovans and took some of the genes, some of those genes actually helped some Homo sapiens kind of adapt to high altitude living.
That is so cool. It's also there's a group of people in the Philippines actually that are showing real time human evolution.
Yeah.
That can now dive their spleens. They've been living on boats for 1,000 years, and now they can dive deeper.
The tree climbers with their feet are almost looking ape-like. They can curl their feet and everything to climb the trees.
I haven't heard about those guys.
Yep.
There's also a pack of wolves in Washington State that are swimming more.
Yep.
And they're starting to their fur is thinning out. Their feet are getting more webbed because they're they spend like 70% of their time in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard about those.
Real time evolution.
Cool stuff.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I just showed some comments from Vic Litt. I just want to give a quick shout out because I know I've talked to you personally before, Vic. I know you've struggled with a lot of stuff, and just keep your chin up and keep doing fantastic. You're an amazing human being. Don't let your pain and difficulties get the better of you because you are a beautiful human. So whenever you're feeling down, remember Austin Sims believes in you wholeheartedly.
Well, I'll add that I'm sorry to hear that, Vic. This is probably our first interaction, and you came across as a highly intelligent person that obviously does their studies and look through the sources and stuff. So, yeah, hope everything's all right and keep it up. And I do enjoy our interaction today.
Yeah, Vic was asking me about Sal Cordova, and a lot of us have a history with Sal. I don't want to give all the details, but we don't think very highly of him. We think he's a big phony, and if you corner him, he will get ugly and say awful things.
Yes.
Yeah, I've only seen him on debates. Like I've never met him at all, but he does seem like a dirty low puncher.
He's fascinating to me because he's very capable of doing both. He can be very sweet and very friendly and, oh, shucks, I'm old Sal, no big deal. And he can also get really surly and gross.
Sugar drops or something.
Yeah.
You heard Gutsy Gibbon or Erica and Dr. Dan talk about Sal. They knew Sal before his YouTube days. So apparently all of them were friends on Reddit. And they said that back in the Reddit days, Sal was a very horrible and terrible person, that he's kind of toned down in YouTube. But I guess my view is that no one ever actually tones down. You are what you are. So if he was actually a terrible person already, he might hide it well on YouTube, but he's always got that terribleness kind of hiding in him somewhere.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad that people are like that too. That's the worst thing about people. Just snakes sometimes in the grass.
Well, he got into it with his church. So, I mean, what kind of idiot do you have to be, And I understand, sometimes people get, booted for all different reasons, but he just got booted because he's a jerk. I mean, it's plain and simple. They didn't want him there.
Which I totally understand.
I think he was trying to tell them how to preach or something like that. Yeah. And they were like, sit down, shut up,
He's very political. He doesn't talk about it overtly so much, but when you do get him going and you do encourage him, the political stuff will eventually come up.
And he's actually like a biochemist or something, isn't he? Like he has real credentials, doesn't he?
He's an engineer, I think. He's got some kind of science chops.
His mentor is Ron Sanford. Yeah.
Doesn't he have like 2,200 degrees or something? Like
he has 5
he did.
Well, you can get honorary ones like Old Hoven's got.
It was like an intern thing or something.
That he has 5 science degrees.
Yeah. What do you call it? Like when you're like you work understudy or something like that. He was one of those people that fetched the petri dishes for Sanford or something like that.
You get a degree for that.
He holds him up on he holds him up on high, and he brings it up every time. Well, I worked with Sanford, and he says this. So yeah, he's all in there.
Yeah, John Sanford wrote a preface for the book Contested Bones, and he said that Christopher Roop, who was the main author of it, he did such a good job. The book was equivalent to a PhD thesis.
I've watched Erica destroy that book. Sentence for sentence.
I'm still waiting for her to finish it, though.
Her content is so awesome.
And happy Pride Month to everybody. And Sal says awful things about that community as well. So he's a piece of garbage.
Mr. Batman is another one that he is horrible about that kind of thing. And it's just why don't you just let people live and be people?
I was setting up a debate with Mr. Batman one time. So I was on Twitter with him. I don't use it anymore, but I got a hold of him by Twitter, so I was chatting to him, and he was up for it. Then I did my Nephilim free debate, and he cancelled on me. And I had a whole script ready, basically, where I was going to accuse him for being a pedophile, because that's his whole shtick.
Oh,
so I had this whole script ready where I would maneuver him to a point where I'll just accuse him he was a pedophile. But it just never happened. I still got it. So if it ever happens, I'm just going to dust off the script and just read from it. Just basically.
I think after Dapper and Erica both completely destroyed him, I don't think he's ever going to try to come back. I've seen where he was in little offshoots or in after show type situations, but I don't think he's ever going to do another debate.
He seems to have an alcohol problem too.
Those guys ruin it for the rest of us. Dapper.
He was the one that was staggering around his front yard in that one video, isn't he?
Was he?
Oh, really? That's hilarious.
I was talking about that Aussie guy from Tasmania, Jason or whatever his name is, the one that swears all the time, called Dapper a gay. Takes I don't want to say it, but he was being very homophobic at Dapper. Jason something. Can't remember his name. Faithful, honest, and true. That's it. Faithful, honest, and true.
Yeah. Man, I had it's amazing how terrible Christians can actually be. I had one that's named, I don't remember, I think his YouTube channel is something about apostle or something or another. But he actually threatened me online, in the comments.
Are you talking about Roger from Mud Fossil University?
Oh, maybe.
Oh, man.
Praise
insane.
Praise I am. Praise I am is one of them that'll
he's ridiculous.
Say just awful things to you.
Smokey Saint, he's another one that's just. But
I'm
this
totally
guy though,
allow this tangent because I think it does demonstrate something that I have been of the opinion of for quite a long time now, which is that I think evolution denial, it's almost 100% political. It's almost completely political. And they won't talk about the political stuff, that the motivation for it is political, until you've completely smashed all their arguments. And then they'll say something like, well, I don't have to listen to someone lecture me about science when they think a woman can be a man. They'll say something about transgender identities, or something like that, and that's when you reveal kind of that it is a political impetus. It's socio-political. It's about fighting a science that returns a lot of control and power and autonomy to people who know about it.
Well, you always know when somebody's losing in an argument or conversation when they start, attacking you personally.
Yeah.
Like, I get called stupid all the time. I get called a liar. It's like, you could not be rude about it. If you just, you want to say something, don't be rude about it. At least, show me how I'm stupid, or show me how I'm a liar. But when I tell you that the Bible says that that it is okay with slavery, or that, God has helped with abortion, don't call me a liar when I can tell you the verse. Like, I mean,
where does it say that in the Bible?
Well,
why do I have to tell you?
like Numbers, it talks about how, if you think that your wife cheated on you, you don't have to have any evidence of it. But if you think your wife cheated on you, and she's pregnant, you can take her down to the temple and they'll give her this magic juice that they make out of dirt and mud and all the other nonsense that was on the floor back then.
Dirt
and then
cocktail.
They make her drink it. And if she has an abortion because of it, then she was the cheater, and he's completely justified. And it's like the deciding factor in that, though, is that God was the one that was punishing her for the messing around. Yeah. So he was actually the one that was giving the abortion, because they did a little voodoo spell and got God involved in it. And it's like, but now they think, oh yeah, abortions. It's so crazy to me. None of them read their book that they claim to.
Yeah, the only time the Bible mentions abortion, it gives you instructions on how to do one.
Yeah, exactly. Or on how to, own slaves, or genocide. That's always the one that I've been talking about a lot lately, is the genocide of when God stopped the moon and the sun in the sky for 24 hours so that his army could finish committing a genocide.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not what he was doing. He was punishing people.
We need more daylight. They're still moving.
Because the sun just stops in the sky, but everything in the Bible is proven fact. So that must have happened.
Well, and anytime empathy is shown, I think several of them, like Moses and different ones that different. I don't remember the exact ones, but there was some empathy given, and Yahweh had nothing to do with it. He said, "How dare you spare any of those people?"
Yeah, that story exactly is what I'm talking about. Where it was King David, I think, or it was one of them. Was it
one of them? Yeah.
He
they're
saved
all awful.
All the it's all terrible. But he saved all the best livestock to sacrifice to God, and he left their king alive so that he could prove to God or whatever that whatever happened. But when God told him, "No, I want you to kill everything that moves, everything that breathes, because you didn't, I'm going to give your power to another guy," which I'm pretty sure was David, and then he'll follow my commandments. And because you didn't, I'm going to punish you for a while, and then you're going to die. So it's like, good job, God. Just keep pushing your genocide. It's so hard sometimes for me to stomach that people actually believe that.
And the other thing too is when they were told, they said, I don't know how to word this nicely, but basically, use the sword, and if she has a pregnant belly, cut it open.
Yep. And then bash the baby's heads off rocks.
That's
kind of abortion in a way, right? I mean, it wasn't just
extreme one,
Yeah, it just wasn't unaliving them. It was making sure that you deliberately unalived what was in her stomach as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or in her belly. Then
you got to keep the virgins in town. As long, and it even says any woman that wasn't touched by the hand of a man, they could keep them as sex slaves.
Yeah.
So their army got to do
Well, their
whatever they want with
property.
them. Yeah, after they watch their little brothers and sisters and the rest of their family get murdered, along with their goats and everything else. But you can keep them as your property and do whatever you want with them.
Yeah.
But the
I
Bible
might
doesn't
have some
support slavery.
issues with my husband if he butchered the rest of my family in front of me.
Yeah, I don't, or if you rape a woman, as long as you pay her dad 30 pieces of silver, you can keep her. After you shave her head and make her walk around bald for 3 months, or it might be a month. I think
Or
it's
just
a month.
send her husband off to war and put him on the front lines so he doesn't come back, and then she's yours. And,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then there's also the story of the guy that was banging his brother's wife, and instead of him impregnating his brother's wife, he relieves himself on the floor, and God punishes him for that because he wasted his seed.
Yep.
Not that he wasn't committing adultery with his brother's wife or anything like that.
But don't call my book silly.
There's a Monty Python movie where they sing a song about how every sperm is sacred.
Is that when they have like 60 kids and she's like, she poops one out like right there when she's talking?
Great.
Well, that's another ID thing, right? Why do you need millions of sperm if you only need one, right? Isn't it all predestined? Exactly. Why doesn't it just, there's only one egg. Why isn't there, one sperm? Yeah.
And, God knows all of it anyway, so.
Right.
Which is another story.
Any other points on genetic evidence that we want to talk about explicitly before we move on to the next category?
I bring up genetics when anybody brings up Darwin, and I says, I don't care about Darwin. It was 150 years ago. We have modern genetics, and that
point. Yes.
I don't care about Darwin. Yeah.
So Darwin had no idea that genetics was how heredity
worked.
No,
he did know there was something, but he didn't know what it was. Somebody corrected me on that the other day. He did mention there is a mechanism, or he did say there's something, but he admitted he didn't know what it was.
He predicted the existence of a hereditary mechanism. He didn't know about the hereditary molecule itself, but it did eventually get discovered, improved, and developed into a very sound science called genetics. His own ideas about how heredity worked, he had a model called pangenesis, and that proved to be completely wrong, obviously. Genetics existed at the same time, and Darwin could have learned about it if he had cared to learn German. He didn't know how to speak German, and all of Mendel's research was in German, so he didn't research it very deeply.
Is he the other
German,
guy?
Maybe. Sorry,
like they talk about how there was a they all try to say Darwin was the only one working on evolutionary science, but that the other guy that was actually coming up with the
there was Darwin who was working on evolution because of the trip he took around the world on the Beagle. Yeah, and there was another guy named Wallace who was doing work with entomology and coming to similar conclusions due to parallel thinking. Originally, Darwin was maybe not even going to publish his ideas until he heard that Wallace was planning to publish. So he published so that his work didn't get swept out from under him. Mendel was working on genetics. That was something different. They never crossed paths. They weren't really competing. It was Wallace and Darwin who were kind of doing the same thing.
Okay.
And Darwin started before Wallace, but Wallace had made more progress more quickly, so Darwin decided to publish. And I think him and Wallace did collaborate. They realized their ideas were parallel, and they collaborated. But I think Darwin's biggest collaborator was a guy named Huxley. Huxley was like Darwin's #1 fan. He was super into Darwin's theory.
That was his bulldog, right?
Yes, he did a lot of debates defending Darwin's theory, and he's got a lot of famous quotes. Like, he's the one who growled that if you want to falsify evolution, find some fossil rabbits in the Precambrian. He also said that he would rather be the descendant of an ape than the descendant of somebody who uses rhetorical tricks to confuse an important scientific matter. So he had a lot of spicy
Wow.
comments.
It's amazing that there was that much scientific knowledge happening 150 years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, that is amazing. Like,
And
it doesn't
the
seem like that
infamous
long ago, but
arguments and rhetorical flourishes have changed so very little.
And
Yeah.
as you said, Austin, there's a lot to try to disprove at the time.
Yeah.
And that also leads to, well, I guess they were right, because if you're trying to do an experiment to disprove something and you can't, that's when you got to say, maybe they're right, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, so we're going to move on to the fourth category, embryology and developmental biology and comparative anatomy.
I love this one.
Me too.
This is one I know the most about, I think.
If you ever want, I discovered this super fun thing you can do. You can go to Google and you can type in human bone human arm bone, human leg bone compared to ape bone. And you can put anything in between human and bone, and the comparison's mind-blowingly similar. Like
That's awesome.
go look up the human arm bone and the gibbon arm bone. They're exactly the freaking same. The only difference is size. The structure is exactly the same. I almost need to show you. I gotta show you. I'm gonna pull it up now.
You know, this is one of those categories that I know we're trying to like not bash too much on Christians or whatever, but like this is one they can never understand for whatever reason. Like, you tell them a million times, especially in the human evolutionary line. It's like you can see where our brain cases changed. They got bigger. You can see where our shoulders changed from where we could only lob something like like our ancestors, to where we have a completely rotated shoulder that we can throw things. You know, we see our knees change, our hips has changed, and they all happen in a very slow morphologic change over this huge time scale. And it's like, oh no, you can't see this from this, but it's like they don't want to realize that there are basal traits that have carried all the way through every one of the examples of our evolutionary line. We have the same teeth, the same dental pattern that Lucy had. We still have, even though our canines are smaller now, our mouth has changed a little, but we still have the same teeth. We have the same arches in our feet. We have the same hip bone, construction. We have all of these things that you can look at and compare. And I always like to use it if you don't have, if you have A, B, and C, but you don't have D, and you kind of have a little bit of F, but you can see at the end of G, A and G still have the same, comparative traits. It's like, obviously there's something going on there.
Jeremy, throw in embryology as well. So if we look at whales and we see that they had evolved in the fossil record, having hind legs, and obviously those hind legs evolving into smaller flippers, and then eventually disappearing in the extant whales and dolphins that we see today. And then you kind of match that to embryology, and you look at the development of, let's say, a whale as it was an embryo inside as it's growing, and you see that it starts developing little hind bud legs, which then gets reabsorbed into the embryo itself. I mean, that to me, the development of embryology and how those hind legs kind of start to come out and it starts getting reabsorbed, and there were like a little bunch of cells. That's proof to me that it matches what we see in the fossil record. Then you look at like other examples like humans and how we start developing a little bit of a tail, and that tail gets reabsorbed back as an embryo when the human starts to form. And then when you look at the reptile, the mammal transition, and you look at the same what is it? Those gill slits that Hoving keeps on talking about, and you look at the embryology of those gill slits and how it becomes kind of jaws in fishes, and how it migrates into the inner ear when you look at mammals as well. And then when you look at the fossil record, you can see how that matches in the fossil records as well. So embryology, here's another example where embryology basically follows exactly what we've learned in things like fossil records and comparative morphology, etc.
See, that's awesome. Like It's amazing how so many structures can carry through and continue. Yeah. Like it's amazing. And it's like, how can you not see that there is evolution at work here? I mean, especially like when you're talking about like leg bones that aren't there anymore. Big snakes have them too, and sometimes boa constrictors have little nublets that are still there. And it's like, it's a snake. Why would it ever need that? But because it used to be a lizard, and it lost its legs. Like, and you can follow that all the way back through the fossil record, and you can see where that diversion happened. Like, you can start seeing where the animals start changing.
But for a long time, they wanted, where's the big missing link, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned Lucy. Well, Lucy is everything they asked for. You've got 8 features. You've got human-like features. There they are all mixed together. And then they just say, well, no, we don't like it. So it doesn't matter. That should be the one that shows this here. Lucy is exactly what you're asking for. And then they just dismiss it. Or Ken Ham, he has his own display where he has it as a knuckle walker. So.
Yep. And that's the worst thing. And that's something that you can see through the fossil changes, as our foramen magnum. Isn't that what that's called, Austin?
Yeah.
Where it changes. Yeah, where you see that animal start to be more upright. You see the change
and
in
the locking knees, knees too.
You see that S-shaped spine start to change and become more of a bipedal hips. Bipedal, like it's so easy to see, but that's just a bunch of lines on paper.
You want to know how important locking knee joints are? My knees bother me from doing some yard work, and it's swollen up. And let me tell you, when you can't trust that knee lock, it makes a big difference.
Oh yeah, I actually have a little experience of that myself. Like I had my anterior meniscus get torn so bad that they had to basically remove it, and along with an ankle injury that happened at the same time. And it's amazing when you can't trust that part of your body anymore. Like,
yeah, you're ready to go on all fours, aren't you? Yeah.
I am. Like, I used to be way worse though, but
the locking knee joints, that should be what you need to show that it's walking upright. And nope, they just don't like it. So it's really hard to argue against something that give me this, and you say here it is, and then they just say nope, I don't like it, and it's like, oh, well, okay, quit asking.
Bones were scattered around, and they just threw a bunch of bones together. Or like when they talk about her hip, like even there's a video online that's from the study that shows when the person that was doing the test or whatever says this is a cast of her hips. This is not her hips, and this is what I'm going to do. And he talked about how he cut it apart so that he could re-articulate it so that it would show what it actually looked like, and it would show her bowl-shaped pelvis and, show those parts that are more human-like. But see, then they only want to talk about, he cut it all, cut it all apart so that it would fit.
What they're leaving out is, though, they have hundreds of other specimens.
Yeah,
right.
So they're thinking they rely everything on Lucy, and even if they had to reconstruct it, that's not the case in every case. So some of them are crushed, and some of them are not so crushed. It all depends on how much deposition was on top of them.
And then they find Littlefoot, who's pretty much a complete, fully articulated skeleton, and they're still like, nope, that's not, that's not possible.
What do you do, right?
A little bit, but I'll give you a little teaser to one of my conclusions that I make at the end of this slideshow, which is that you should generally be suspicious of anything a creationist says. But I know that sounds pretty rough.
That's the understatement of the year.
The best advice I could give you for sure. But anyways, I wanted to show you guys this photo. And I'm going to ask each of you to tell me which you think is the human ape arm and which is a not human ape arm, as well as everybody in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if you think the arm on the left is the human ape arm, and put a 2 in the chat if you think the arm on the right is the human ape arm. And then you guys can just shout out whichever you think is which.
Is the little one the human one?
Yeah, I think so. Little one.
That's what I was going to say. The little one is the human one because the arm bones are similar.
Right?
And the thumb looks more in the right position.
More curved in the chimp.
You got that tiny bone that breaks in your arm all the time too.
I
That's
love
what
that
happens when
all
we
of
get
you
old.
said one. That's a gibbon arm.
Is
Is
it?
it?
Yeah.
Oh,
The
Yeah.
hand looks more like it looks more articulated like a human hand.
It's wild because every place that the human arm has a bone or a joint or a tendon, the gibbon has a bone or joint or tendon in that exact same place. So you
Wow.
guys
Neat.
covered the embryological similar. Yep, that's Erica's arm. I'm sure Erica would love that. Yeah, you guys covered the embryological side of things really well. This is the comparative anatomy side, and it's incredible. You can indeed just show pictures of human bones next to groups of ape bones, and they're shockingly similar. It's wild how
Wow.
similar they are.
But we're
But
not
yeah,
related.
I just wanted to share that one there
That is
because I thought
awesome.
that was fun. Let's
That
put the screen.
Well, it's obvious that a 5-year-old can tell the difference there. But us dummies, we couldn't tell the difference.
you sound like me. I've seen so many of Hoven's debates. It's almost sad. Like
Dogs are
because
still dogs.
yeah, like I think I could probably run his whole script for him. But it's just
I've only
because
done one video on him, and it was the layers thing. And I didn't mention his name in the video. I just wore a Hawaiian shirt to kind of give the hint. And I laid down a card to simulate a layer of deposition, and I turned over an egg timer, and then I put down another card because he likes to use the cards.
yeah.
Yeah,
And each time I said, "Now see, the card was put down at a different time, even though the cards are the same age. They're laid down at a different time. Look at the egg timers." That's my only video about Hoven, and I didn't mention his name when I made it.
yeah.
Well,
That video was very well done.
He's
I
been
really
proven wrong so many times that I actually learn a lot from the people he's debating. So I have to force myself to watch. Ian actually is one of the people that I watched his debate a couple times. Like I learned
Ian's
so much.
one of my favorites. I'm a fan that through and through. The way he slips the digs in, and
that's what I like about
Hoven doesn't even notice he slips them in so well. It is brilliant. It is brilliant, truly brilliant.
Hard Rock Kent is always one that gets me. Like I love that. Like, but it's like so many people have shown so many different ways that he is a moron. That I have learned so much from all those people that it's just like it's worth me having to listen to Hoven's script another 15 or 20 or 30 times.
People like Ian and a lot of other ones that have debated him, you know what's going to come because he says the same thing. So if you're prepared, don't let him lead you anywhere. Just stick with what you want to say. That's the best way to defeat him. If you let him take you astray, then he's going to win because, he didn't have to answer you and he's asking you one of his silly questions. Yeah.
His nonsense spewing is what it is. Like he just keeps that goo going. Like,
well, I think creationists are kind of up against it in the debate. They need to purposefully frame the debate all wrong because that's kind of what the point of the first slide was, is that evolution is a quantifiable, falsifiable, plausible solution to unanswered questions about natural history. And ultimately, they need to find a way to argue that it's not, and they need to find a way to explain the evidence that's better than evolution, that explains all of the evidence better. And they can kind of cherry pick some evidence and make some arguments like that, and it's okay. But ultimately, what they have to do is they have to pretend like you need to watch a fly evolve into a whale to know that evolution is true. And that's not really what...
Not even that. The one I watched the other night wanted a bacteria to give birth to a rat.
Yeah, something crazy like that.
And it has to happen right now. Like it has to go from then to that. Like
it has to open right up, and a rat has to open up out of it.
Pop right out of there, like
right through the cell membrane, and just
because you can't get a dog that can never jump over the moon.
They need to do that is because they know that they can't really make a good argument that evolution isn't a quantifiable, falsifiable, plausible solution to unanswered questions.
It's a boogeyman. It all goes into their persecution complex. And, you don't have crusades going on and all this stuff. So they have to use evolution or, folks in a certain
biogenesis.
community or folks of a certain ethnicity. There's always got to be somebody that they have to set up as their enemy.
Yeah.
And, you've seen it. Yeah. Through everything, right? Interracial marriage. Oh no, the Bible says, but it's always something. They have to have their enemies out there. So
they love them some humiliation rituals. They do that a lot too. Okay, so one final thing I want to touch on before we move away from evo-devo, and I'll let you guys add your 2 cents if there's anything else you want to add. I want to talk a little bit about reproductive anatomy, reproductive biology, because reproduction is one of the 5 things that defines living organisms, and reproductive systems recapitulate evolutionary phylogeny to a degree that's kind of mind-blowing. You wouldn't even necessarily think it would recapitulate that development that much. Like, there is the saying that, what is it? Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. And what that means is kind of like what Ian was talking about, how you can find laryngeal gill arches and, structures that develop into parts of a fish in a fish genome, in a human genome, and in us, they develop into parts of our jaw and our ear. That is embryology recapitulating phylogeny, but reproductive systems themselves recapitulate phylogeny. Like our reproductive system, we're amniotic placental mammals. And all of those reproductive strategies had to evolve from previous ones that were like, in early times, in the early stages of life, reproduction was a lot more simple because basically everything was a microorganism or it lived in the ocean. And microorganisms can reproduce through mitosis, but more complex multicellular organisms, it's a little harder to reproduce. We have this ova and spermatozoa system, the gamete system. And it starts off as an oceanic system where you just deposit the eggs right out into the ocean because you already have the 100% humidity environment necessary to fertilize an ovum there. And then as organisms start to experiment with life on land, you have more and more of a reason to develop internal reproductive systems because you're away from that 100% humidity environment for ever increasing spans of time. So eventually you end up with these amniotic placental systems, and that is a big part of whale evolution. And it tells us that whales are mammals and they're descendants of land mammals who are descendants of ocean tetrapods. And they have this amniotic placental reproductive system, even though virtually everything else in its environment has that aquatic reproductive system. And I think it's really fascinating especially because it's really particularly bad for biblical literalists. Because guess what day the Bible says whales were made on?
Oh, yeah, they were fish.
Yeah, they were made with the fish and they were made on the same day as the fish. But we know now for sure that's not the way it actually happened. The taxonomy of it is all wrong. I had a guy who's an old Earth creationist. He asked me about this. Like, if you just do the day-age, he's a day-age creationist. Somebody, if you're familiar with that
one day
concept.
was a million years.
Yeah, he's one of those. And he's like, how can that doesn't work? And I'm like, because the taxonomy is all wrong. You have the whales in with the fish when they're actually mammals.
Well, bats are
and they
birds
weren't
too.
created at the same time. So that's that. I wanted to touch on reproductive anatomy is huge.
So that also comes into when people when the people that are anti-science say, well, you can't have a male and a female just pop up all at once. Like, they don't like to talk about the fact that there used to be like 10, 15 different ways that that animals, whatever they were, microorganisms, could reproduce. And then the male and female parts just kind of showed up through that process, and that became the easiest route. Evolution, again, just finding the easiest way. So it's like there weren't just all of a sudden a male and then the next day there was a female and boom, they're banging. Like, it was a process, like everything else on this planet, that took some time to create. And I hate using the word create because you know God or whatever, but
So
it took some time for that to happen.
So the same way you talked about how the seahorse, its ancestors are still around, right?
Uh-huh.
The ancestors of modern reproductive systems are still around too. Like we still see frogs laying eggs and making tadpoles and stuff. All of the precursor reproductive systems exist still alongside modern, more derived reproductive systems. It's really, really interesting.
That is amazing.
And we can see that even by studying the sexual organs themselves. Like, do you know what a cloaca is?
Yeah, like what birds and snakes have.
Yeah.
Everything comes out of one hole.
Yes, they have a single opening for everything that they need to do. They have a single opening for expelling digestive waste, and they also have the same opening for sexual reproduction. And that is an example of how this modern reproductive strategy evolved. It starts off with just being able to fertilize the eggs very closely and gradually evolves until you're fertilizing the eggs inside of the mother. Really fascinating.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think Aaron Rod did a whole video about this. It's really great.
He has awesome videos.
Yes, I love Aaron. He's awesome.
I watched the 30 different videos that dispelled the flood and all that. Like that was a really cool series of videos. And his philology challenge. Sorry, I'm getting
phylogeny challenge. Yeah,
it's been a long couple days for me, but like
that was a great challenge. I thought that was super clever, and he's right. It's uncollected still, and it'll never be collected.
Never be. They're never going to be able to prove it wrong.
And it's because universal ancestry is true.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think you can be complete without mentioning Ernst Haeckel.
Oh gosh, we didn't mention Ernst Haeckel.
The creationists love to bring up Ernst Haeckel and that how discredited everything is. But if you look at his drawings, which were drawings,
I know what you're talking about now.
Yes. And if you look at modern photographs, they're pretty dang close.
Yes. He took some slight artistic license. He exaggerated things just a little bit. But
and he reused some stamps or whatever when they printed it because of cost and time and everything. But the Hawaiian shirt guy likes to say that he was put on trial and discredited and all this. That never happened. And once again, all you have to do is put up his drawings up against photos, and they're pretty dang good. I mean, better than probably most of us could draw. So close enough for the day and age. And it doesn't matter because he also leaves out in the textbooks, even if they show or mention something about Haeckel, there are modern intro embryonic or intro fetal whatever cameras. They actually go in there and with a camera and you can see inside,
so people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between an elephant fetus, a dolphin fetus, a human fetus, a rat fetus. They all look extremely similar.
Very, very.
That's amazing.
I didn't want you to forget him because that's the one you always hear when you're talking about the embryology, and Ian mentioned the gill slits with that Hovind always brings that up. Yeah. And that always leads to, and that Ernst Haeckel was on trial and they discredited him. And no. And again, it was a long time ago. How about opening a modern textbook, Hovind? Okay. Just for once, open one that was,
that's how they always try to discredit Darwin too. And it's like, Darwin was 150 years ago. And of course he's going to get a few things wrong. And, of course he's not going to know a few things, but that was like 150 years ago. Like, I mean, science is always changing, so you can't trust it. It's like, no, you can trust it because it's coming with the most up-to-date facts that you can find on the subject.
Yeah. Jeremy, it's all part of the greatness wanting evolution to be a religion, though, isn't it? So they want to show that, it's equivalent to them. Evolution's a religion, so we must have a prophet, and that's Darwin.
Yeah, that's him. He's the one we worship. Like that's the man. I have a temple and a shrine just for him. And
what do you sacrifice?
I have one for Bigfoot. So
Yes.
You know, I
I'm the
may
odd
have heard
man out.
Bigfoot once. I
I have
mean,
a cool picture of Einstein. I don't have any Darwins. I should get one.
If you got a Bigfoot story you want to share, get a hold of me. I'll bring you on the Grassman Chronicles, and you can share it. I'd love to hear it.
yeah, it was. I mean, it's not a very long story, and it involves me
Yeah,
smoking pot, but it was real, and like I know that it scared the shit out of my dog. So
hey, the offer's out there. If you ever want to talk about it, get a hold of me.
Would.
All hail Bigfoot at Gmail. Easy to remember.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to remember. Yeah, because I mean, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was something.
Yeah,
probably somebody's drunk hairy uncle. But anyway,
well, and I lived in Eastern Oregon, and like when I looked on the map, apparently that's like where most of the Bigfoot sightings actually happen. Is in the northeast corner of Oregon.
Pacific Northwest is a hot spot. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe, you never know.
So moving on to category 5, biogeography. And I feel like I covered the big part of why this one matters when we were going over the categories. It shows the distribution of species.
Yep.
Our lovely Australian species that only appear in Australia. Basically, biogeography, it supports the evolutionary pattern that we attest is how things develop. And it also creates real problems, especially for young Earth creationists. Because if you think the flood actually happened, what biogeography shows is necessary for it to have happened is the kangaroos needed to leave Australia, at least 2 of them, hop all the way across the ocean, ride on the ark for whatever amount of time, land in the Middle East, and hop back to Australia. But they also needed to do so without leaving behind any droppings, any fur, any fingernails, any physical evidence whatsoever that they ever
they put it in their pouch. They put it in their pouch.
Sloths are a great example of that also.
Yeah.
Like how does a sloth that only can move 45 yards in a day make it from the middle of Turkey all the way to South America and not leave a migration pattern?
And biogeography also shows just like how the clades of organisms are organized based on geography. Like, I think marsupials themselves are almost completely Australian. Are there any
there's only the possums in America.
Marsupial species? I think there's only like 2 or 3 non-Australian marsupials.
Possums are one of them.
The rest of the marsupials are in Australia, as far as I know.
And I think
most of them definitely. But if you look at the fossils, you can, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you'll kind of see marsupial fossils in South America, Antarctica, etc. So that kind of shows your biogeography as well, on how the continents used to be together, how they used to be shared across those continents, and how for some reason all the extent one, or most of the extent one, occurs in Australia now.
Well, that happened in the flood.
It strengthens both evolutionary lineages and plate tectonics at the same time.
Yeah, and when the fountains of deep broke open.
It happened in the flood, Jeremy.
Yeah. When the fountains of the deep broke open and all the continents automatically just shifted to where they are now, even though that would melt the planet about 70 fucking times. But
not if it's made of gopher wood. You got to have gopher wood, because that stuff is indestructible.
Is definitely not flammable. Like, he had to have torches for all that inside the boat too. So,
well, methane,
yeah, that's not at all a problem, because there was one window.
Ken Ham has an open. He has an open forge going on his ark. That would work really well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I personally have worked around a lot of large animals, and I've smelled a lot of cow farts, and that's outside. I couldn't imagine, 1,000 animals stuck in a boat smaller than like
with one window. With one window. It's the Bible specifically says one window. It doesn't say ventilate well. It says one window.
And they try to say that one window went all the way around the top of the ark, and that was enough fresh air.
Still not enough.
Yeah, it's like we have boats nowadays that can't take a group of sheep from the United States to Europe without half of them dying.
Well, Ken Ham wanted to have live animals inside his ark.
Yeah.
And the
Can't
cruelty
do
to
that.
animal people said, no, you can't do that.
Can't do that.
You know what animals I want to see him host live populations of in his ark? I want to see him get some xylophages in there. Get yourself some termites and breed
Doesn't he
them
have
rapidly.
like a whale like ancestor in there? Hippo something or another?
Hyrocotherium,
Yeah, that's it.
something
Like
like
it's
that.
actually in
Yeah.
there, and it's like, okay, bud. Like, good
And
job, fella.
dinosaurs. And
Yeah,
there's dinosaurs.
one of the dioramas in the first part of it is like a bunch of people fighting a dinosaur.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Tim.
Like,
That's Tim Chafee. Tim Chafee's the model for the big guy in that diorama. He works there.
Oh, really?
He's like he's like 6'8" or something
that's
like
the dude
that.
that can't
He's
speak very well, right? The one that
yeah,
has a
he's
stutter,
yeah,
like,
he's yep.
man, that place is something else. Like it's
Yabba
it's
dabba
amazing.
do.
Yeah, like it's amazing that they think that all that biodiversity happened in just one, one show. Like,
Yeah, well, evolution's untrue except for after the flood,
exactly.
when a couple thousand animals became 8 million species overnight. Then you
only in a
have
couple,
And then it
couple
stopped.
super
years.
duper evolution.
And then it slowed down to the rates we observe it
And then
at
it
now.
dropped back off
Yeah.
again.
There's no explanation for that either. Like, we'd be seeing
Oh.
like 50 new species a day.
And have you seen
Like-
Ken Ham's books to children, where
Oh, no.
they actually have saddles on dinosaurs?
Oh my
They have
God,
dinosaurs
wow.
pulling a plow in the fields. It's straight out of the Flintstones. It might as well be, Fred on the Brontosaurus at the gravel pit.
Yeah,
It's equally as ridiculous.
that's like ecozonation, I think is what they call it, where they say that the reason that you find dinosaurs lower in the strata is because they weren't
bigger.
smart enough to outrun they
Yeah.
weren't smart enough to outrun the floodwaters.
I'm
And
so
that
glad
they lived
you
at lower
mentioned-
elevation.
I'm so glad you mentioned the KT impact barrier, because that is a big part of how biogeography substantiates evolution.
Yep.
And that
Absolutely.
ties into that Paleopathology, that super obscure, abstruse, specific science about studying ancient pollens and ancient grains, because part of the reason we know that happened during the summer is because they found fossil pollens inside some of the dinosaur fossils that were killed during the KT impact.
Mhm.
Isn't
That is
mind-blowing?
awesome. I didn't know that.
Isn't
That is so
crazy?
cool.
Yes.
And there's another thing where you find a layer with this material and you say, what's all this material? And then you call up, your whatever field astronomer or whatever, and they say, oh yeah, that's from a meteorite. That's what meteorites are made of.
Yeah.
And it all converges together that, that big rock hit that.
Convergent lines of inquiry, convergent facts, independent verification out the wazoo.
Yep.
Like, oh my God.
Absolutely.
Yeah, none of those things would have to be anything whatsoever to do with evolution at all. It can just be, what's this? You contact different fields. Yeah, they all put in their opinions and they test it, and it goes through all their testing, and they all come back and say, this is what it is. Through various fields. That's pretty good evidence.
And the fact that you'll never find a dinosaur above it, or a modern elephant below it.
Right.
Even though like T-Rex and elephants both weigh about 15 tons, a T-Rex probably would have had less density actually, because they're honeycomb bones, and the fact that they're just lighter animals in general.
And it goes out the window because elephants can swim. You see elephants swimming, so I mean
exactly.
they could have swam around for a while. They can swim, so that's a Hoven thing with what hydrological sorting, I think they call it. It's nonsense. It doesn't work. He says, put stuff in a jar, shake it up yourself. You know what, Hoven? I've done that. It doesn't work. You're full of crap.
Yeah. And it's like T-Rex and a modern elephant, they all kind of lived in the same elevation. So that blows that out of the water, that, if the dinosaurs are lower elevation. They were both grassland animals. like they kind of lived in the same kind of environment, like, but for some reason, you know, they ended up in the lower end, like, or it's like when you think about Utah raptors
Snorkels.
and all of those animals that are in like the fossil beds in Utah, you don't find any modern animals in there with them.
No.
And I'm personally under the idea that I can't outrun a Utah raptor.
No.
So, like,
Well, and
I
like
think,
your, what is it, the Titanosaur? Isn't that the biggest one with the huge neck? I mean, it could keep its head above water for quite a while, right?
Exactly. Like, it would have taken a little while for him to drown.
Yeah.
Like, I saw one of those actually in the museum in the modern natural history, or the American Museum of Natural Science in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
That animal is huge. It was so big that it took up the whole corner of the whole dinosaur exhibit like area. Like, it was huge. And it's like, why don't we find them, you know, down there with with the blue whale? You know, since the blue whale is the biggest animal that's ever lived on our earth.
The only way creationist stuff sounds good is if you just listen to what they say. You never bother to look up anything else or get any more information, because as soon as you do, it all crumbles. No matter how you come at it, it crumbles. Yeah.
And that's what they're banking on, is that you're not going to look it up independently. Because the preacher's telling you, or Kent Hovind's telling you. And there are so many people that think he is just so smart with his 5 PhDs or whatever. But they know that he will not, that you're not going to go and look it up. They won't independently verify any of it, because their preacher told them.
And they are bold with it. I did one of their things where they were, I reviewed one of AIG's goofball things, and they were giving the papers they were getting the numbers from. And I was like, oh boy, right? And sure enough, you look up those papers and they did not say what they were saying. So they are bold enough to give you a citation knowing you're not even going to look it up, and you're not going to click on the link to read it or anything else. Yeah, that they'll completely take their word for anything they say. Even, they'll boldly say, here's the citation, knowing, like you said, they're never going to look at it. Never going to look it up.
It's the same with the Bible verses. They know they can say God's happy and all this and that, but you're not going to look into the genocide or the slavery or any of that, because your preacher didn't tell you about it, so why look it up?
Yeah. Where's that in the Bible?
That's kind of the mind frame that those people have.
If I had a nickel for every time I heard, where is that in the Bible, from a believer, and I would, my response is always, don't you know where it's at in your book?
Shouldn't you know, since you read your Bible and study your Bible? Some people,
so if they're not reading their own book, if they're only reading one book, the joke is, we have a book, you need more books, right? Okay. Well, if you're only reading the one book, you could at least do that, but they're not the only one book they're worried about. Yeah, they're not reading that.
That's not true. Where's it at? Prove it.
How are you going to expect them to open another book?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's sad.
All right, we're about halfway through. Do we want to take a quick break? Give ourselves 3 minutes to use the.
Yeah, I could use a cup of tea.
Water.
Yeah, I'm gonna go grab some Hennessy real quick.
We'll give us 3 minutes here to take a little break, stretch the legs out, and then we'll come back.
Sounds good.
Right back.
Hello?
Ian, is that you?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I just came back, so I'm in an intermission.
Oh, we're all taking a break real quick.
Right. I had to go put the, nice. I had to go put the little one to sleep.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Hey, how you doing,
baby?
Yes, so tiring, to be honest.
I bet it is, man. I've never had that privilege, but I bet that is a full-time job.
Hey, you doing all right, Tony?
Huh?
You're doing all right. We can't shut you up, to be honest. You're like so knowledgeable in this stuff now.
Well, I try. Like, I do feel like I'm a little less nervous this time, so it's definitely helping.
You were nervous the first time, or if you were, you couldn't tell.
Yeah, that's true. And then I definitely do feel a little better this time now.
Yeah, good.
It was a little intimidating, I'll tell you. The first time, it was like, holy shit, I'm on the internet. Like, this is.
I think you came on when the presentation was on, so I can't see whether you trimmed your beard or not.
All right, got a little snifter of some Hennessy. Maybe I'll make it a little taller. Well, it was a long day, man. I'll tell you. It's been.
Yeah, well, you've worked 30 hours in the last couple of days. So
yeah,
you worked 30 hours in the last 2 days.
Yeah, 14 and a half yesterday and 12 today.
You must be beat.
Yeah, it's been a long day, but it's all right. I wasn't going to do anything else tonight, so.
I might only have
Boy, I feel like we were staying a lot more on topic this time. I believe. Let's jump up.
Well, I mean, we've got the slides to help direct us, I suppose, but it's relatively on topic. But I think the tangents are quite fun. I think it's kind of what makes the show. I think the tangents are kind of good to listen to.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think that the time not being made was a good decision because I do like the free flowing.
Well, I was trying to interrupt to give the time thing, but it was really difficult, so I just gave up. I just went, you know what? Let's not worry about the time. Let's just keep it going.
Yeah, it's definitely better free flowing.
Yeah.
I'm back and I'm ready to get back into it. Real quick, before we do, I want to take a second and acknowledge we've had around 60 plus people watching this stream for quite a while now. That's some of the highest traffic I've ever got on my channel. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's watching this, and definitely pat yourself on the back for being smart and nerdy enough to realize how important the science is and to spend some of your free time learning about it with us other nerds online. You guys are special.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
I bet you are the group of people watching this and understanding it, you guys are going to be more immune to propaganda than like 90% of other people. And just give yourself some applause for just being an awesome human being and coming in and watching and participating. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. Go to my friend Dave's channel and subscribe there too. Give him lots of likes and lots of love. He's got a great channel. Jeremy hasn't started a channel yet, but hopefully he will soon. And when he does, go and subscribe to him. Ian has his own channel, but he doesn't produce a lot of content. He mostly does debates, but definitely go subscribe to him and watch his incredible debates. He is the Nephilim Slayer. And yeah, thank you all for being here, and thank you to my co-hosts for helping out.
Anytime, man. I'm just glad you invited me back.
Thank you. I'm amazed when any significant amount of people are willing to tune in to something as dry and technical as this, and that isn't about like erectile dysfunction or male pattern baldness or something like. Those are the only things that science seems to care about. I'm glad that we as people are a little more sophisticated and are capable of caring about this issue too.
They've come here to learn the evolutionary viewpoint of whales' penises. So you might want to talk a little bit about whales.
That is important. That's why those legs are there. Like that's why they're still there.
Yes, you guys.
It might be a long one.
Put a whale penis slide.
Yeah. This will be a very long stream.
Oh no, are we talking about the 15-footer now?
Yeah.
You know what they say about men with big feet, don't they, Dave?
They got big shoes.
We're big shoes.
I got a 13 extra wide, man.
You know what? Everyone thinks having a massive cock is a blessing, but it's really more of a curse. You're always stepping on it and tripping over it, slamming it.
Can't ever bury it completely.
Leaving it on the butts. Come back, you've got my penis. Anyways.
Actually, I was
And
having a
proof that God is not a man is testicles. No man would dangle them things out there like that.
That is something that women will never understand. You know, it only takes the breath of something to, you know, impact your testicle and make you cry.
And the whole thing is, right, in other species they're up inside. Ours descended,
even
and you know what?
mammals.
And you know what the downfall of it is? Not to mention they're unprotected. Is what my son had experienced about a year ago, is a hernia, because you have a weakening in the abdominal muscles, so that then things can descend. So yeah, if you ever get a hernia, and that's why men usually get them more than women, is because your gonads had to descend. So
I think
does that sound like design? No, that sounds like stuff moved because of evolution.
Oh yeah,
I think the reason that is still technically an advantage is because of the temperature.
That's stupid, though. That don't make no sense. Yeah. Why don't they like body temperature? That you're a designer, and your thing that makes life doesn't like body temperature.
Yeah.
You know,
they need some air conditioning. So
when I lived in Eastern Oregon, the water in the lakes there was so cold it made you feel like a 6-year-old when you got in there. Because
shrinkage.
It was shrinkage. It closed up so small that it almost went back in your body. Nothing like a crystal clear lake.
Those of us who've had little ones know that, you know, when they're very, very young, it's you got to kind of teach them to push it out a little bit, because it's you got to clean it, you know, and okay, you kind of got to. It's, you know, all right, you want to do this.
Yes, and I totally agree with you here on this comment. I think of the two sex organs, the vagina is definitely the stronger, more resilient organ. It pushes an entire human out of it.
That's true.
Compared to that, I think balls and, you know, scrotums, they just aren't.
I knew a guy that could take a blow to the head and just shake it off, right?
Yeah.
And he got tagged one day, and he was down on the ground.
It'll make you cry.
It's awful.
And it doesn't even take really getting smashed is a problem. Like, all it takes is a breath of something.
My dog wagging his tail.
Like, oh man.
Dogs wagging their tail. If you have at least a medium to large sized dog, that's dangerous. That is dangerous.
Yeah, claps for sure.
Dog's all happy. All of a sudden, you ain't very happy.
Yeah. So for category 6 here, this one, explaining how all of this supports evolution is kind of like explaining how water supports the ocean. Biology is evolution. Botany is evolution. And looking at living organisms, the things you see only make sense through the lens of evolution. And I think there's a famous quote, it's a Dobzhansky's quote, I think, that biology only makes sense through the lens of evolution. And there are several biological disciplines that are very directly pivotal to evolution. So we've got your traditional biology, which is the study of living organisms. And like, I think it's fun, the fact that some of the more basic stuff is getting included in this. This is a very technical presentation with a lot of really deep stuff, but the more fundamental stuff is getting into play too, because evolution makes a lot of sense through studying the systems that construct a living thing. There are 5 characteristics that define a living thing. We think we can list the 5 things? I can remember a couple of them.
I'm sure it's got to breathe.
Processes. That's right. That's one of them. It has metabolic processes. It absorbs and uses materials.
Reproduction.
Yeah, we already covered that one. Stimuli. Stimuli is a huge one, right?
Response to stimuli.
React to stimuli. So reproduction, growing, things have to grow and develop. We were talking about developmental biology there a little bit. And then the last one is they're systemic, they're organized, they're it's not just a pile of rocks and mud and twigs, right? It's a cell membrane with a nucleus and a nucleolus and vacuoles and all. It's an organized system, right? And we can compare how these systems have changed over time through paleontology, paleoscience, and I think botany, the plants.
I really like plants.
I need to just do a really deep dive.
I
into
think we
botany.
definitely should do one of these on the poisonous plants. I think that's a really cool subject.
Man, there's a point about that too in here later.
Or the carnivorous ones.
Just toxins in general is really fascinating.
Yeah, creationists bring that up a lot. How did venom and everything just show up? And well, it's just nasty saliva. That's all it really is.
The Bombay beetle
didn't brush your teeth enough, and and these things happen.
There are a shocking number of organisms that have a secretion or bite or scratch that is basically toxic. It's way more common in the natural world than we thought it was previously. This was the result of a recent study that was completed. It took about 10 years to complete, and it shows that animals use toxins, they use strategies that attack another animal's ability to continue living a lot more than we thought they would, which kind of lines up with computer simulations. There was a guy who did a whole series of computer simulations where he took really simplified simulated organisms and he gave them the kill function, and the kill function became pivotal to how they evolved over generations. Really fascinating.
Yeah, well, just with the Komodos, and there's other species that do it too.
There's a primate actually.
They just bite you, and their mouth is just so nasty, it's going to give you an infection. So it's that's kind of an in between, right? Where it's not as effective as taking something down right away, but those developed because they weren't. They had to take it down right away for self-preservation, like a small
like a
spider or something,
or a snake that lives out in Australia where it has to tag something and it has to die right then.
Yeah,
or
so
they're not going to eat.
Yeah, so it has to ingest it right away, right?
Well, they will only see that mouse maybe once a month, so it's so important that they tag it. It dies right then. There's no question. Which is why the inland taipan is so.
Yeah, the Komodo and there's other ones that do it as well. Yeah, they're patient enough because their metabolism's slow enough.
Yeah,
and they'll just
a month and wait.
Yeah, and they can just slowly follow you because you're going to get slower and slower anyways.
It's going to start kicking in eventually,
But yeah, it kind of goes from just having a nasty mouth to just getting it, more refined, and then getting, the fangs or whatever to inject it is just more down the line, right? Yeah.
What I loved, one of the things I loved most about that specific study that I was talking about, the one showing how common toxicity usage is that the evolution of counter-toxic systems has been just as profound and prolific. It is the quintessential example of what's called an evolutionary arms race. Where
like a mongoose
competing in their ability to adapt, and it directly impacts selection. It's really fascinating. One of the other most well-known evolutionary arms races is sexual reproduction itself. That is a huge evolutionary arms race in several species. Most famously, the ducks. Do you guys know why ducks are weird in their sexual reproduction? You may have if you've ever perused social media.
I've heard. Yeah, I don't remember, but I've heard things.
So
about the ducks. Yeah,
ducks are an example of the evolutionary arms race in their reproductive anatomy because, yes, indeed, they have really weird genitalia. The females have It
is that where it falls off?
They have highly evolved genitalia because ducks are super rapey, as it turns out. Male ducks don't care about consent at all. And as a result, the female ducks have evolved anatomy that is sexually frustrating. It purposefully stymies sexual connection. And they're called labyrinthine
so it just wiggles around and like.
And as a result, the male ducks have evolved really, really bizarrely shaped, like corkscrew-like penises. They look like a pig's curly tail almost, to let them still be able to deposit the reproductive material in the depth of the womb. It's really fascinating. It's really bizarre.
Well, monogamy.
If you ever see anybody with a duck corkscrew wine opener thing, you'll know.
Well, monogamy among humans, coming from the Bible or anything, that doesn't hold either, because humans kind of have a plunger, because you're competing with other males as well. So the whole one man, one woman thing is not biological.
At
least not with us.
Monogamous.
I think the way our reproductive strategy is set up, it's very common in species that have binary sexual genders for the one that gets pregnant to be more monogamous and the one who impregnates to be less monogamous. Because if you're the one who gets impregnated, being more monogamous means you're more likely to get taken care of by your mate. More of your offspring will survive. And then if you're the party that doesn't get impregnated, if you're less monogamous, you spread more of your genetic material. You end up with more offspring because you have more mates. So
there's species that
evolutionary issues in there that, and yes, of course, Christians are terrible with sexual morality. Their morality is really weird and bizarre and draconian and very anti-human.
There's species that morph too. When they mate, they just become one, and they're no longer individuals anymore.
Or there's some
just permanent, so to speak.
Like there are certain fish that'll go from being a female to a male so that they can impregnate the rest of the fish.
Yeah.
And I think frogs do a lot too.
Is as kaleidoscopic as biology itself, and that goes for genders and sex and all that stuff. There's a species of mushroom that has over 20,000 different biological sexes.
Wow, that's like what we were talking about earlier, where there's male and female showed up way after.
Yeah.
And then you've got the ones that store it as well, right? Like bears and stuff, they'll mate, but they'll store it because they want to time it right for if like hibernation and stuff like that.
Right?
Yeah. So, because again, you might not run into the bear, right? So when you run into the other bear, you want to take advantage of running into the other bear, exchange materials, but it might not be a good time. Or I think like some of the fish and stuff do that too, so that they can lay their eggs at the all at the right. It's all, there's timing involved, right? Not fish, but what is it? A spider maybe. There's something else that stores it. So when it's rare to find each other, that they either morph together so that they can do it later, or they have certain areas where they store it so they can use it at their own convenience, and they can do multiple generations too. So again, you might not run into each other.
Yeah.
So they can keep reproducing even if they don't run into another mate. So there's all different kind of ways that they've figured out how to time things, so to speak, is my general point. Yeah.
That makes the movie Finding Nemo a little bit weirder.
It definitely does.
Marlin's his transgender dad. Transmission.
And seahorses carry the young, right? There's an adaptation for the males to carry the young.
We could easily be on the core biology all night. Did we talk about the specific ones I want to go over? We got biology, botany. Oh, cellular biology, and this is one that I myself am not as schooled in. I am starting to learn about it a lot more in my college courses, and I'm freaking loving it. And yes, it too especially screams evolution, because creationists say that evolution can't happen because you need change in kind. Well, in fact, and I said this earlier, humans are still just clumps of eukaryotes. Have we changed kind even though we've evolved a lot? I don't know. There's a perspective from which you can argue we haven't really changed kind, and that's microscopic. And even below that, there's the fact that we're all just made up of biomolecules, and that never changes either. All these similarities in homology really screams common ancestry, but it especially does in cellular biology, because every single organism on the planet organizes into one of three domains: archaea, prokarya, or eukarya. And it's very likely that eukarya are just highly endosymbiosynthetized archaea, which, when I say that, what I mean is, do we know what endosymbiosis is?
Yep.
You
Those are
probably
all a
remember,
bunch of big words.
you probably remember the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right?
Yep.
Well, mitochondria aren't human. They're actually a foreign entity. They're not part of our cells. They formed a symbiotic relationship with our cells somewhere in our evolutionary history. Everybody remembers it's the powerhouse of the cell, but a lot of people forget they aren't native to human cells. We endosymbiosynthesized with them. Our cells engulfed them, and then they formed a symbiotic relationship instead of the bigger cell dissolving the smaller cell within its
Right.
cytoplasm.
Yeah, they went to eat them, but it didn't
endosymbiosis
digest
is.
it. Yeah.
Precisely, yes. So archaea are older extremophiles that we think eventually the descendants of them became eukaryotes. Archaea engulfed other microstructures, and instead of them being digested, they were capable of forming some kind of symbiosis.
So how did it get introduced?
It would have just been in the ambient environment.
So it would have just been when the cells were just kind of floating around?
Under a microscope, they're sponging around and they're absorbing stuff. They're eating. They travel around and they eat. And the theory is they tried to eat something that, instead of dissolving, became a part of its core processes. They developed functions, and eventually that became eukaryotes.
And then the cell wall developed around it and just kind of sucked it in, and that. Wow.
It also explains a lot of creationist objections about how did this all come together in this one thing. And it's like, because it came together in numerous ones. And then they basically, like Austin said, they were just eating each other. But for some reason, whatever, it didn't dissolve. So then it became, another big advancement, because it didn't have to do it. It just swallowed it. Yeah.
Wow,
there's an especially interesting example of archaea, a species called Asgard archaea. It's an extremophile. They think this thing might be our most recent common ancestor in terms of microorganisms. This is possibly the ancestor of the eukaryotes that became us.
Wow.
Asgard archaea.
That's amazing that they can go that far back. Like
it's because they found specific biomolecules in it that they now know there's homology there. So there's a good chance there's either common ancestry or it itself is the ancestor.
Wow.
Really fascinating. Something called If Mike were here, I'm sure he would nerd out about it, because he was really excited when he learned about that, Dave. I told him about that, and I got to break that news to him.
I think he burned himself out doing his stream earlier with Kafai.
Yeah. Oh no, it's all right. I wouldn't. This is going to be such a long one.
You need to get some fresh air. So
you got to get going.
I didn't want to bother anybody, but I've just got to go help the wife put the little one to bed. So I'll stay on and I'll come back when I can. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Yep.
No,
You know,
Ian,
but then
forget
really
your
interesting. So
newborn child and stay here for the people who need you.
I'll be back.
All right, see you in the video.
All right.
All right, so cytology, entomology. Oh, wow. Insects. Insects are big for evolution. That's another one I need to study more. There's a guy, he's an entomologist. Jeremy, I think you probably know him, John Peters. Do you remember John Peters? Have you met him?
Oh, no, I haven't.
He posts on a lot of the same groups that we are posting on.
Does he?
You should definitely get to know him because he has written about ERVs a lot, as well as he himself is an entomologist.
Oh,
and
wow, that's awesome. Maybe I have.
Studied the heck out of both creationism and evolution. He's a phenomenal resource. He's got a whole blog about it.
I see a lot of people on there, and
yeah.
And lately, like I'm starting to see, I'm actually friending a lot of people that like make a lot of comments on my stuff, and so like I'm starting to meet people, but I don't really ever know anybody by their name. I've never been one of those people that remember people's names very well, so it's always like I remember what they've said, or like the argument that they put forward, but usually I don't really remember their names. But there's a lot of really important, really intelligent people in those groups.
If you want to talk bugs, you can always get a hold of Bree too. She's a lay person, but she knows her bugs pretty well. I'm sure she would be happy to do something with you if you're going to talk about bugs, because Bree loves bugs. So.
Bugs are interesting. Like the Bombay beetle is always one that they bring up. But after I looked into that, that's a really cool, interesting bug. Like, acid out of its ass. Like, that's a pretty interesting way to live. Like, good survival tactic, that's for sure. I'm going to spray you in the face like a skunk, and then you're not going to want nothing to do with me. Like that.
There you go. But see, it's not unique, right? There you go. A skunk has developed it, and just a lot of animals can just, spray urine or whatever. If you're coming at them, you know what I mean? It gets in your eyes, you know what I mean? So
yeah, is that also kind of included in convergent evolution, like we were talking about earlier, where I mean they're completely separate animals, but it's kind of the same process, like where they develop something that
something they can squirt,
propels,
that
keeps things away from them,
and it's not nice, whatever, it can burn, it can stink, it can
smell,
blind you, whatever it does. Yeah, so it's not all the same chemically either.
Yeah. Jellyfish do it, snakes do it. Like, it's amazing how many animals actually have processes like that to protect themselves.
Squid with ink, right? To get away and stuff. Yeah.
A spitting cobra can, throw its venom like 10 feet.
And there's species of lizards that spray blood out of their eyes.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yep. I love Animal Planet.
It's extremely metal.
Yeah, like that's interesting. Like, I always wanted to be a zoologist when I was a kid. So like, Animal Planet is one of my favorite channels.
It's like, oh yeah, watch this. I can squirt blood out of my eyes.
Yeah, watch this, buddy. Like, I think you're tough.
This is why I kind of want to duke it out with creationists a little bit, is because what do you think your chances are of becoming a zoologist, even if you're not handicapped by this bull crap in modern America, where our educational system is failing, and maybe 2 or 3 out of an entire body of students are going to get the algebra skills they need to become a zoologist, let alone if their parents are telling them a bunch of religious bull crap.
What's really sad?
Lies. It does really frustrate me sometimes.
I have a niece who just recently graduated from a 4-year biology, degree. Like, I think she's a chemical engineer or some sort of biologist. But she graduated from a Christian college.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to wonder what she actually was taught. Like how they could even do that topic without involving evolution, without involving a lot of things that are based in evolution.
Well,
like, how does she ever get that degree?
In their defense, Ken Ham has a list of schools that he thinks are worthy. It's gotten really small over the years.
Yeah.
So that means they're at least teaching some things that they should be teaching. So again, I'm not a fan of religion or anything, but to their credit, most of the Christian so-called universities are teaching somewhat legitimate biology classes.
Well, that's good to know, because that's one of the things that my siblings try to throw in my face when we start talking about this, this topic in general, that, she's got a degree in, in biology, and it's like, so she can prove God through biology, and it's like, I don't care what degree you have, you're not doing it. Like, it's not going to happen.
Check AIG's list, and if the school's on that list, then it's not a good school. They do a thing every year, like a recruitment type thing, where you have all your tables with all the universities or whatever. They host one at AIG annually.
Oh wow, really?
And it's only scary. It's only the schools that Ken Ham deems are teaching creationism.
There's an interesting historical, sociological,
but it's not very many.
Economic. There's a sociological aspect to what has been taught in specific schools when. Like, when we were during the height of the Cold War, everybody was teaching evolution-based science. Nobody was teaching creationism when the Ruskies were beating us into space and making us look like we were lagging behind them in technological development. Nowadays, it seems like we just don't care anywhere near as much about our school systems, even though we are continuing to fall behind the world in terms of things like scientific literacy, economic literacy, philosophical literacy. I think generally our education levels are in big trouble here in America. And I think creationism contributes to it, for sure. It's a big part of the problem. And because people have a tendency to go, oh, this is religious, I'd rather just not talk about it. Yeah. This has kind of festered in dark corners, and it's bubbled up and started to spill over. And the political aspect of it is the main charge that's actually being led in this nonsense. And I think it's a big part of why neo-fascism is becoming so powerful. It hides itself in religion.
Well, and even if you have a good class, they're teaching the kids to be interrupters, to stand up and say, this is all a bunch of lies, blah, 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 and interrupt classes. So they're I don't know, loosely termed, they're breeding brats, right? They, what kind of parent tells your kid to disrupt class, right? In my day, if my parents got a phone call, it was disrupting class, it wasn't a good day, right?
Yeah.
Now it's, go to school and disrupt class. It's like, what is wrong with you? Yeah.
Forrest, not long ago, did a video over, I don't know if it was ICR or one of them, AIG, some of them, made this little, video about this, old dude that went back to college. And, the whole premise of it was him just interrupting his professor, telling him that, evolution is wrong and this and that. And, it's like, man, they made him out to be this awesome dude, but he was just rude. Yeah. It was like he didn't have any good arguments, and he was just rude. He would get up and be like, "Oh, you're wrong," and then.
Well, and I asked Austin this before. I said, Austin's paying a lot of money for this class. Yeah. Austin, would you be very happy if your class was being interrupted that you're paying a lot of money for? And Austin said, no.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Yeah,
I mean, Austin's there to learn, right? He doesn't want this idiot interrupting class because he's saying, hey, wait a minute. I just had to write a big fat check to take this class. Why don't you sit down and shut up, right?
To be fair, I didn't write a check. My schooling has been covered by a grant.
So to speak, yeah.
But I
That's
did
awesome.
spend my time going to the class and getting all of the material, and
Yeah.
So
you're there to
if I was
learn
mad
either
about the
way.
money, yeah.
It's like
Well,
all the
if
people
you're
that,
going to
the
public
effort.
education and it didn't cost you anything but your parents' taxes, obviously, but yeah, if you're going to public education, same thing. If you want to learn it, it's like you're going to look at the other kid like, shut up. I'm trying to learn this,
Yep.
Fern, I don't disagree with this comment that credible scientists did a disservice. I don't disagree, but I understand why it happened. Credible scientists made a slight and understandable miscalculation. They figured, oh, it's pointless to talk to a creationist because they're not going to change their mind anyway, which is true. The way it was a slight miscalculation is that you maybe don't contradict creationists and do counter apologetics against them to convince them that they're wrong. You do it so that they won't brainwash other people. Because generally, you won't convince someone once they've bought into the conspiracy theory that it's fake. But if you educate somebody before they're exposed to the conspiracy theory, they're almost never going to fall for it. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I was saying the people in this audience will be profoundly more resistant to propaganda than like 90% of people, because you've got this presentation that shows you virtually the entire body of what we call scientific facts and knowledge supports evolution.
And these, they get a big audience, right? And a lot of us, like you're doing right now, it's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to get hundreds of thousands or millions of people getting this information. No offense. I mean, I hope you go viral. But there's been talk before that there's a lack of science communicators. We've got Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson and a couple other folks, but yeah, they got to go up with people like Hovind and these other organizations like AIG, ICR that employ a bunch of people that are going all around, going to all these churches and any place else they can go, giving their talks. And there's not enough Bill Nye's and Neil's to to push back, right? So yeah, we do need more science communicators, and I wish they would do like the little ads like they used to do, like need to know commercials or whatever, where they would just drop stuff on TV, media, whatever. Just, hey, just so you know, they just discovered a new dinosaur or whatever. You know what I mean? Just the little things. You know what I mean? You don't see it. There's not enough exposure to it unless you go specifically looking for it.
Yeah. And and the sad thing is it's all out there.
Yeah.
There's so much knowledge out there for free.
Yes.
Like everything I've learned about evolution in the last probably 6-7 years, I've gotten from YouTube. Like I've watched people like Erica and Dapper Dino and Forrest and all the people that are just giving it away for free.
Yeah.
And it's like all you got to do is look for it. You just got to like take a little bit of time and put a little effort into it, and you can learn anything you want.
That's well, I think we already discussed though. People won't go looking for it. That's why
they won't. Like,
we need more people out there. Like you say, you're just going to church, right? Well, here's Kent Hovind giving you a speech. Well, Bill Nye's not there.
Exactly, and there's nobody telling him he's wrong. So he's telling a whole group of people that this is what's real.
Now,
and then they're all like, oh yeah.
I'm sure there are churches that are fair that also have other people speak, but it should be, well, you know what? We had Hovind in. We should invite Bill Nye or an equivalent. You know what I mean? Somebody from a university or whatever. Yeah, but there's the divide, right? You're only hearing from this. And
I know,
if you're
in the Mennonite church that I grew up in, that would have never happened.
Exactly. And you're looking up to, this preacher also to be a so-called teacher, right?
Yep.
Well, they're only presenting this, so he must have already determined this is all we need to listen to.
Yeah, this is the truth.
And then they're just not going to hear the other stuff, right? That's a big problem.
It's just like, all they tell you is John 3:16, God for loved the world, blah, blah, blah. But they don't tell you about, Exodus 20:21, where they're talking about beating your slave. Like
God so loved the world, but he doesn't like anything on it because God sees all of his creation as abomination, which abomination means you don't like it.
Exactly. And, he knew it was going to be that way anyway. So,
Part of the
there's a lot of
plan.
effort there. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Part
he
of the
already
plan.
knew, he knew people like me. I'm an atheist. I'm going to go to hell, according to the, religious people. And God already knew that. So God made me to go to hell. Like,
Yep.
he created me knowing that I'm not going to believe him. So, let's just send him to hell. So it's like what a great loving guy he is.
Well, and if he doesn't have enough of them, he'll harden your heart so that you can't possibly ever come to God. So you're screwed either way.
Exactly. And then he can torture your people, innocent people that had nothing to do with it.
The conversation moved on a little bit, but I did want to make this point, which what you all were talking about a little bit earlier there, with the way that there is. I think that social media, in a lot of ways, is both the problem and the solution. Because Jeremy, yes, you are absolutely right that if you are interested and curious, and you have enough of just the bare modicum of intellectual work ethic, you can absolutely go into social media and find the answers you are looking for. But also, social media, it partly causes the problem in some ways, in that social media search engine filters, they're very repetitive. They have a hard right leaning for the most part, for one, and for two, they show you the stuff that you reacted with more than anything else. So, like, if you've gone and you've searched up evolution is a hoax even once, and you watch 2 or 3 videos, it's going to show you videos related to that idea a lot more. So somebody who's a standing for
the
truth
algorithm.
fan, who watches tons of standing for truth videos, any evolution term they search up, standing for truth videos are going to come up before anything else. So there's a feedback loop, as well as just the fact that social media is also designed to show you the stuff that you're most interested, the most dopamine, serotonin, addictive ass stuff you deal with, the stuff that you're clicking. So scientific facts about evolution and climate change and vaccines and global pandemics and public health and safety, it has to compete with adorable cat videos to get your attention, to get your engagement. And that is a real bad uphill battle.
Man, I'm competing with.
I think really don't like science that much.
I'm competing with this channel that has their security cameras on, like I have right now, with the night vision showing the orbs. Like I can see one right now, some spider or something's climbing around out there. They've got tens of thousands of subs and tens of thousands of views. Watching night vision security camera highlight every little glow in the dark eye. And there's a reason that they glow like that. And it would be great if they would open a book and find out why. Instead, thousands of people are saying, oh, the orbs, look at the orbs. It's all magic. And it's my grandma visiting me or some nonsense. It's like, no, I'm looking at it right now. It's a spider.
Yeah.
It's a spider.
That stuff's more fun.
But how long can you watch somebody's night security cameras, Austin? You know what I mean? I'm like, really? It just breaks my heart.
You know what? There is lots of addictive stuff out there. One of the addictive rabbit holes I fell down, there's this guy named Josh Slavin, and all he does is he tries death row inmates' final meals, and he ranks them on a chart, and he's made hundreds of these videos. And I've watched almost every one of them. They're so entertaining. I don't know why. They're so enthralling. It's super addictive. But there's countless rabbit holes like that.
I honestly have a lot of random stuff that comes up because I go down all kinds of rabbit holes. Like 100%. I like watching police interrogations, but I also like fuzzy cat videos.
I love the police interrogations.
Like there's all kinds of stuff. Like interrogations are interesting. Like the psychological parts of that go into those kind of things are just like wow. And then when you start really finding out the crime that the person did, it's like, holy shit. Like, that person really deserves to do the rest of their life in prison. Like I've seen some pretty terrible, like where it's just like, wow, you really are just the scum of the earth. Like
Yeah.
I think that you should just go back with a 10 millimeter and like get it over with, like because it's just
That's
terrible. And
that's something we discovered when we were covering a lot of the cryptid stories, and especially a lot of the horrible monsters out there, that shred people and everything.
uh,
And we figure it's because we can't wrap our minds around another human being doing that to somebody. So we
yeah,
had to create monsters and demons and all these things because surely another human being could not do that.
couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Except for H. Holmes, who like used to poison people for fun.
But
But
again, this comes back to evolutionary science. It makes sense when you realize our brains are mostly randomly cobbled together, that they are randomly constructed and therefore go haywire all the time. And
Mhm.
understanding that, it's kind of like looking the absence of God in the face. And I think that's why creationists fight against it more than any of what they claim their reasons are. I think it is precisely the fact that it is so true that creationists, it makes sense of things like that. It
yeah,
does, and you don't need a God for it to happen. There's so many reasons. The fact that it makes Adam and Eve impossible.
Mhm.
You can really see where the psychological motivations come from, and then there's the whole sociological institutions and structures that they've constructed to purposefully miseducate people. Freaking sloppy, shoddy propaganda mills like
Yeah,
Creationist Ministries
Well,
International and
that's the thing that bugs me
stuff.
though, Austin. AIG fights so hard against evolution
Yeah.
and they go after abortion and other social issues, but their biggest one that put them on the map is fighting evolution. But yet, as soon as those animals get off that magic zoo boat,
Right.
they have super duper evolution and they
yeah,
accept every mechanism of evolution as long as it happens in a matter of a couple years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
10 to
any
4,000 years.
timeline, then it can't possibly happen, but it can happen within a few years, no problem. And that's
Yep.
the ultimate ridiculousness of it. They absolutely accept every mechanism of evolution after the magic zoo boat because they have to get from they have to explain because they can't get 8 million species on the boat, so they have to have just a certain number of kinds on the boat that get to the millions of species, so they have to have all the mechanisms just happening at a incredible rate in a matter of a few years.
Per day. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the ultimate thing. If you listen to them, after Magic Zoo Boat, evolution is fine as long as it happens really, really, really fast. If you
And as
try to
long
slow
as
any of it down,
humans aren't
yeah,
touched by it, because we're not just primates.
yeah,
We're not just
yeah,
clumps of eukaryotes. We're God's special children. We weren't. That is the crux of it. Is that they need to place humans above the rest of the kingdom Animalia. We can't just be part of that. We have
Yeah.
to be something
well,
special.
and I can agree, like with what William Lane Craig tries to do, is that Adam and Eve were basically like the first spiritual people. And
Yeah.
see, if you take it as many metaphorical things are already in your religious texts, then it's like Adam and Eve were the beginning of, they were the first ones that said, you know what, we're going to worship God. Okay.
I
And
have
sure, that
seen.
probably happened and is somewhere along in our evolution. There was some of our ancestors decided to start worshiping the great sun or whatever they were worshiping. Right.
I have
That
seen a couple of people use that argument in debates, and it does seem
yeah.
to be
And
fairly.
again, there you go. You can accept the science and you can still have faith because ultimately what it comes down to is how you think about yourself, your morals and everything. And then it's your afterlife, right? So there's no real reason to buck up against science. If you can look yourself in the mirror and you're not worried about where you're going when you die, that's all that really comes down to. And fighting against science just seems so pointless in the end to their own beliefs.
I think the main reason it happens, Dave, is because if they have to rethink whether or not Genesis is literal, then it's a slippery slope. I mean, even Ken Ham himself has basically admitted that.
Well, the Jews have already done that, a long time ago. They accept it, pretty much. They're moderates on things, and they have told Ken Ham they don't understand how the Jewish texts were written.
Yeah, because
with the way that it was written and the language of the time and everything. I saw what's his name, Kaiser, I think, look Ken Ham right in the eye and say, "You don't understand Hebrew." And see, there's a problem too. He's trying to read a Hebrew story told thousands of years ago, whenever it was told, in that time, and then he's trying to tell it in English in the 20th century, in 21st century, and he's been told by, and Kaiser's a Christian. He's a Christian, but he's a Jewish scholar, and he's told Ken Ham, "You don't understand it." So this man again can be a Christian while still understanding the Jewish origins of the story, and that they are not a literal, as Ken Ham has taken it, some kind of a science thing. So he's not even in the right realms of understanding his own texts.
Hey guys, I hate to tell you, but I'm starting to fade pretty fast.
I
gotta go to work.
Going, you're fine.
So I'm gonna have to get out of here.
Yeah, we're still only about halfway through, so I'm gonna keep on going.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry I can't go any further. It's been a long couple days for me, and I got to work tomorrow too. So
have a good night. Good talking with you.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you. Austin, I'm always down to do this whenever whenever I'm available and stuff. So
I say, you ever want to talk about Bigfoot? Captive Desk is my channel as well as my screen name. So I'm like the only one. So
we can talk about it. It's not a real long story, but he didn't chase.
That's fine.
But we can definitely talk about it.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, you guys have a good night. I know Ian's out doing something yet, so
have a good one, Jeremy.
Just let me know next time, man. Yep, I'll definitely keep trying to learn. So, anytime you want to do it again, let me know.
Will do.
Yep. You guys have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Yep. See you later. All right, go ahead, Austin.
Well, let's see here.
What's next?
We're talking currently about the core disciplines of biology, and we covered the first slide, but I do want to talk a little bit about what we've got here on the second slide. We already kind of covered microbiology, but I do want to talk about marine biology a little bit, because as far as evolution can tell, all life comes from the ocean, right? I mean, the first living organisms were extremophiles, most likely, that lived on volcanic, oceanic vents, and those microorganisms diversified into modern eukaryotes and eventually developed the ability to become multicellular. We have experiments that demonstrate multicellularity. So marine biology, microbiology, all this is very strong evidence for evolution. And I think this one is an especially salient one. Like, I asked my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, what do you think is a good sign that all life comes from the ocean? And she immediately got it. We all need water to survive. Like 100%. Yeah.
And we're mostly made of water.
Yeah. Right. That too. Yes. 100%. So I think marine biology is a big one. Microbiology is a big one. Primatology. But virology, especially, and you know what I'm noticing too, as we get deeper into it, we're talking about a lot of things we've already covered, because things are so interdisciplinary. They are so interconnected. Virology is important because viruses, not only do they evolve extremely fast, but they've left behind crime scene evidence in our genome in the form of ERVs.
And they're very close to being considered alive. It's one of those things of what, did they come before? Did they come after? Did they come at the same time? Because viruses have almost all the requirements for life, but not quite.
4 out of 5 of the things. They just don't have their own structures for reproducing. They have to hijack another structure to reproduce.
But in a way, that's, that might just be what it does. So, you could almost include it as a function in a way.
Agreed.
But that's one of the things where they're saying life just happened, like, oh yeah, life just happened and it hasn't happened again type argument. Well, you just look at viruses, that seems to be like a parallel thing, or one or the other came before the other.
Precisely. Yeah, I agree. Oh, we talked about taxonomy already. Phew, I'm starting to get information overload. Maybe I'm ready to drop out myself. And we're still only halfway through. We're still only on category 7 out of 14.
You can always bookmark it, and we can do it again if you're a.
I think that'll be a good idea. We'll have to break this one down into a 2-parter. We'll cover number 7, and then we'll pick up again another time at number 8. So this will be the last one we do for tonight, because I appreciate our fantastic audience sticking around.
Hey, you had a lot of folks dropping by and watching, Austin.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody stopping through. I saw like 50 people watching, man. That's a good turnout.
It's a great turnout, especially for such an important scientific topic. I'm so glad that we're reaching so many people with stimulating knowledge and whale penis jokes. All right. So let's talk a little bit about ecology, and then we'll make some final remarks for this chapter.
I did plug the show last night and everything, so hopefully we got the word out a little bit. Try to help everybody out,
Oh man, we could easily talk about ecology. Several of these should end up being full episodes of their own eventually. And
if you're gonna have something, Austin, don't forget, always let me know, because I'll put it up when I'm streaming, and I'll plug you and everything.
Oh, cool! Thank you. Of course, we'll do.
Yeah,
oh
that's
man,
great.
And you know what? I think this one is not just important for how evolutionary science works. I think this one also speaks a lot to the socio-political context, because ecological sciences, climatology, evolution, all of that stuff tells us that not only does the environment impact the organism, but the organisms can also impact the environment. And right-wing fundamentalist Christians, God-loving, Bible-thumping types, they do not agree with that. They think the planet is untouchable. It's under God's wreath of protection, and nothing we can do will cause catastrophic failure of our climate and environment. And
even if it does, even if we destroy ourselves, they'll just equate it with an end times prophecy.
Yeah, it was destiny. There was nothing you could have done to stop.
So either way, they win, so to speak.
Yeah. So, and this is a big part of why I think fighting anti-intellectualism is important, because fighting anti-intellectualism makes us more capable of addressing other problems, because you don't have people denying them and not accepting that they're problems and not accepting the call of action to do something about them. So this and man, does ecology support evolution. I you know what's great is we're only on this number of slides about the actual, like, we're on slide 19 of the categories. Around slide 33, I think 34 is when I switched to just listing all my sources. And oh my God, there's a lot of sources. I've got over 400, 500 sources here. And then most of these sources also have enormous bodies of references. So my number of granddaughter sources is in the thousands.
Good job putting all your stuff together.
Oh my God, this was so much effort. It was mind-blowing amount of effort. But oh God, I forget what I was going to say. We were talking about. Oh yeah, we're only on like slide 20. We're only Oh man. Yeah, I'm starting to burn out. It's been a long stream.
Well, you would make Hovind envious of your slides. You
Oh my
truly
God,
would.
I know, right? He's got his thousands of slides, and every one of my slides is worth more than all of his slides added together, and I've got about 60 of them.
But you don't have a citation from the children's book you got it from in 1800.
Right. Oh man, what I think we were just kind of talking. Oh yes, I remember what I was going to say. One of the sources I've got for the ecology and environmental interaction section is about an experiment they did. This study, it's mind blowing. Dave, they created an entire ecosystem out of tubing and pipes and tarps and canvas. They created a artificial river ecosystem to measure the impact evolution had on the ecosystem. Incredible, mind-blowing experiment.
That would be something I'd be, you know, maybe if I had to start things all over. Yeah, that would be like a field I'd be interested in because
So cool.
yeah, I would love to plumb something like that and everything. That'd be fun to do.
I love this study that they did. Mind-blowing, super strong eco science, and getting the fact that I knew about that study and experiment when I did my debate with Kent Hovind and he started talking about hydrological sorting, immediately, like the first thing I think is, can we do an experiment like that with hydrological sorting? And of course, he was like, "Oh yeah, great idea. You funded, I'll do it." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Well, we know you don't really have to do it. We've already done that. It's called physics. Physics is the experiment that disproves the hydrological sorting. You don't even need to build a whole environment to prove it wrong. But the fact that you can do that and substantiate evolution with it, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
And it's one of those things too. It was mentioned earlier. I think was it Jeremy or something that said it that you have large animals that totally mess up the mass argument. So
right,
it's a terrible argument.
So this is also a 2-slide.
And ultimately, you can do Hovind's jar experiment. Put a bunch of stuff in a jar, shake it up. I've done it. It doesn't sort out like he says it does.
Right. Yeah.
He defeats himself by saying, "Just do it yourself." I've done it, Hovind, and there's videos of it too. People have done it, and you can look it up and you can see the video. It does not sort out like he says it will.
Mm-hmm. But that's a sad indictment of Hovind's followers, right? I don't think, because they wouldn't do that. Most of Hovind's followers would just believe what he says, and they wouldn't even try to do it themselves.
Even when he tells them to do it themselves, they won't do it themselves.
He knows He knows they won't do it, so he plays on that.
Yeah. So, ecogenetics. This one really stood out to me when I was putting the list together. Ecogenetics and ecogenomics. That is fascinating to me. It turns out, as I was putting this list together, and I did enlist the help of an AI to assess the scientific data pools and extrapolate a number of scientific fields that support evolution. A couple of them, I was kind of like, is the AI hallucinating here? Is it making something up? Because what the hell is ecological genomics, right? So I had to pull the sources.
Austin, I'm maybe about 4 chapters into the latest Richard Dawkins book. It's called The Genetic Book of the Dead, and I think it talks a little bit about this. The whole book is basically around how you can look at the genome of an organization, of especially ones that are long dead, and basically infer from that genome what its paleo environment looks like. So obviously, if it has genetics for fins, you know that it lived in the water. So, but it goes into a lot more detail than that. So it's basically looking at, and basically extrapolating what the environment was like.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Ian. You read my mind. Get out of my brain. Because yes, it's real. It's a real thing. It's a real field.
Yeah, well,
this is how
before I read the book,
evolutionary science has become. To the point
before
that
I read the book, I
that.
wouldn't have known what this was. So yes, definitely.
Wow, Ian, you just blew my mind.
See what you learn when you go out to debunk some nonsense.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Tell me about it.
Well, I never knew a whale had 15-inch penises too, so I learned that.
Yeah, and I'll never forget it either.
And there's a bunch of these. There's eco-toxicology. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the study that showed so many species of organisms use toxic compounds as a method of evolutionary advantage. Really fascinating. It's such a pervasive thing, as well as the evolutionary systems that develop defenses for it. So, like our livers, our filtration systems, those all probably evolved in response to the sheer number of biotoxins you can encounter in a natural environment. Really fascinating. And it doesn't just talk about that. There's another one of these that talks about and it might be a subdiscipline of this. It talks about the fact that your secretions have an impact on the environment, on the ecosystem. You know, your urine, your feces, and all of the fluids that come out of you, they also have a measurable impact on the environment. They might even cause certain blending of microgenetics. So it's possible that certain forms of horizontal gene transfer occurred due to random mixing of biological secretions in natural environments. It's so mind-blowing to me how much of science ends up being important. Evolution is important to it. Evolution is important to so much. It blows my mind that anybody who actually does the work to dip their toes into all of this science can come away with any other impression. And that it has led me to be even more suspicious of creationists. I always kind of thought, you know, I was one of the most pessimistic people I know of when it comes to their perception of creationists. And somehow I've become even more pessimistic as a result of this. This has made me, putting all of this scientific information together, has made me so much more suspicious of the creationist PhDs. What the fuck are they doing in school? What, are they looking into any of this shit? Do you think? I don't think they are. I think they're purposefully avoiding getting too deep into the scientific data pools. I think they don't want to do the work. And when you do the work, creationism falls apart really fast. You don't stay a creationist long if you're honest and you actually get educated. So the ones that actually get educated, I think mostly they're not being honest. And you know what? There are a few that are honest. It stymies me. Like I think Todd Wood and Kurt Wise are both pretty honest creationists. It's bizarre.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
I know, right? Yeah, I still kind of struggle to understand it. But
well, like I said, I only if they will stay in the realm of magic. I will even give credit to Jim Bob. When asked about the magic zoo boat, he says it's magic, it's a miracle, and right. he doesn't go any farther. And it's like, but of course, you know, he goes at it with the evolution and everything, so he discredits himself. But if they would 100% take that stance, then I'll let them have their beliefs. But yeah, anybody, including the creationists, Jim Bob, Ken Ham, Hovind, any of them, when they're trying to mix it across, and then the problem is they want to kind of make that their religious thing. So if you're saying anything against it, they set you up as attacking their religion as well, and not keeping it as, no, I'm just attacking this nonsense that even your religious peers don't agree with. A lot of the theologians like William Lane Craig and Sean, what's his name? McDowell, Sean McDowell. You know, a lot of these ones, yeah, they push back as much as anybody else because they kind of, see the nonsense as giving the religion a bad name, where you shouldn't need the nonsense to promote your religion, right? And if you're going that way, and to me, I've pointed it out before as an outsider, why aren't you talking about how great your religion is rather than spending all this time talking about evolution, only to find out you're giving out a bunch of disinformation? But it doesn't argue well for. Shouldn't you be telling everybody how great your religion is, instead of being dishonest to people? And then when they find out, a lot of people that will cause them to walk away, because they say, if you were dishonest to me about this, you were dishonest to me about other things, I can no longer trust you. And they're doing even a greater harm to their own faith and everything, because they're coming out as dishonest, and they're finding out the evolutionists were just telling them what the biology book says. Yeah. And speaking of biology books, you said something earlier, and I wanted to mention it before you wrap things up. As far as evolution being the basis of all of modern biology and everything, I've asked before, when you get to a creationist, ask them, what pages can we tear out of the biology book, and then it still be a coherent book when you're done with it?
That's a good one. Yeah, because every page is relevant to evolution, and not just in the biology book. All of the, evolution makes sense of radiometry. So if evolution's not right, you got to throw out a lot of the particle physics books too. Mm-hmm. All biology is already incredibly broad, but most sciences have some kind of blend. Physics and chemistry play some role in almost every single science there is, So, yes.
Yeah, because when Hovind says, can you make a dog as big as Texas? It's like, well, no, now you're violating physics. And you know what else violates physics? Your Nephilim in the Bible, because 15 to 20 foot people violate physics. You want to know how I know? Look up Guinness World Records for the tallest people. They're crippled, full of diseases, and they didn't live very long. But yet these things were these mighty giants building the pyramids and everything. Not with a walker. And it's, it's a genetic thing, right? That's why they have all these health issues, and I feel for them and everything. But it's the same reason that you can't have giants, because physics comes into play, and you can't pump the blood and everything else, right?
Yes, there's something called the square cubed law, because it's a three-dimensional object. The larger it gets, the more intense the mass becomes for the frame of the object.
And you'd have to have elephant legs to hold you up and all that, right? Yeah.
So I think
it makes a great B movie. It makes a great B movie that you can make people gigantic and small and stuff. But when the physics comes in, it works either way that it won't work. You have to be the size you are for the systems you have to work the way they do. If you're real small or real large, your systems no longer work. And that's why insects, breathe through their skin and all these different things. Yeah. And elephants, have to do their thing and morph all their toes together into a big pad and this big gigantic leg just to hold you up. So that's the things that Hovind doesn't understand, is that you can't just make something huge. You have to completely restructure it, and then only to a certain point, which somebody what's his name? Roger, the mud fossil guy.
Oh yeah. Mud Fossil University.
They're another one that he has people and animals and dragons that are as big as continents.
Yeah.
Where do these things move around or eat or anything else when you're as big as a continent? You know what I mean? It just becomes they're not even listening to themselves. They blow these things up so huge without realizing, if you have a dragon as big as the Rocky Mountains, it's going to eat like everything in one bite. And then what does it do?
Right.
And then at the same time, there's giant fish, there's giant people, there's giant trees, there's all these giant things. And without it seems like they're not listening to themselves. because all I'm getting is a vision of like a cartoon where, like Bugs Bunny and the Martian, and the planet gets all blowed up, and there's just a little tiny pebble, and everything's standing on that little tiny pebble.
Yeah.
It's like it's like, really, that's what you're thinking in your head that makes any sense to you whatsoever.
Yeah.
Then it's so deep down the rabbit hole. They're not even getting any air anymore. You know what I mean?
Well, Sydney Raptor says physics is the king, and I have to agree. I've always kind of been of the opinion that biology, in a sense, is just applied physics and applied chemistry.
Yeah, and Sydney mentioned gopher wood. One more thing with the gopher wood. Yeah, it's nuclear proof.
Yeah,
it's 12,000 mile an hour tidal wave proof.
Yeah,
it's volcano proof. And anything you can throw at that gopher wood. And sadly, nobody knows what it was and can't find any species of it today, because I think we all would be better off with some gopher wood furniture and home structures, especially in like hurricane areas and stuff. They could just sit in their they could sit in their living room and just laugh at the hurricane. I am built of gopher wood.
So I think we're gonna wind it down here.
You did a great job, Austin and Ian. It's always great talking with you. And
thank you.
You were well prepared, Austin. You do a good job. You got all your ducks in a row, so to speak. Well presented. And get a hold of me. I'm looking forward to part 2.
Much appreciated. So
it was fun. It was great to have Dave on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You, Dave,
I appreciate it.
Y'all were great. Thank you so much to the 3 of you. You've been phenomenal. Thank you to the 80 people in the audience watching right now.
Woo-hoo.
You all are awesome. Please give me a like and a subscribe, and go over to Dave's channel and like and subscribe to him too. He's also a great content producer, has tons of awesome stuff about evolution and science and creationism and politics, and a lot of the same stuff I'm covering
and cryptids
about here.
And cryptids.
Yes.
All hail Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, the Bigfoot. I love it. He's got some great music on his channel too. Your outro song, I'm so envious of it. It's great. I'm envious of it. To put a couple of final points on the first half of all the evidence for evolution, we're talking, the main thing is the foundational observations and concepts: paleontology, genetics, and applied evolution. And all of that breaks out into a lot more. It breaks out into the philosophy of science itself. And that is ultimately what religious people are attacking. They are attacking a method of questioning your beliefs. And it is that method that produced evolution. And it's also that method that leads countless people away from religion every year. So question your beliefs. Question them the best you can. Research what other people think. Be curious. Be skeptical. Think critically. And be like an evolutionary biologist and question what you think you know. And if you're a creationist watching this, I hope that you have learned that you don't really have much hope to argue against the concept that evolution is a quantifiable, falsifiable, plausible solution to unanswered questions about natural history. And I hope you instead pivot to being like a theistic evolutionist type. Someone who says, okay, yeah, evolution, obviously true. Ancient age of the earth, also obviously true. How do my religious beliefs fit into that? And what that generally is going to take the form of is you're going to end up being something like an old earth creationist or a theistic evolutionist. Somebody who accepts that the earth is very ancient, that organisms, the array of organism on the planet, and all of the extinct ones in the fossil record, they've all been shaped by selection and mutation. And parts of the Bible are hyperbolic and symbolic and literary devices that aren't being literal about history. And most people, I think, do that just fine. And it allows them to appreciate science. And I think it makes them a little more empathetic and nicer in their lives. And it makes them invested in what's going on now and less invested in what's happening in some hypothetical afterlife that they might not even get to see. And when they do that, they start doing things like voting for candidates who care about the environment and ecosystem. And they start doing things like voting for candidates who care about inequality and income for the middle class and lower classes. And that is why the issue is mostly political. So, in summation, for this half, this was a buttload of evidence of evolution. Take action what you can now to understand science and to correct misinformation when it's around you, as well as other forms of ignorance. Call out bigots too. And we look forward to doing more of this, doing the final half for you guys either next week or the week after. We got another 7 categories to cover, and these first 7 categories was so fun. I'm really excited for it now. I can't wait to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent.
Anything else, guys?
I would just plug Potholer 54 if you want to learn how to source check.
Yes.
Potholer 54 is probably one of the best folks on the internet to teach you how to source check and look up citations and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to learn how to fact check your own self, even make sure you do a little learning over at Potholer 54's channel. Great stuff over there.
RJ was really going ham about that on the episode that I had him on. He loves historiological source methodology, and he told me it's one of those things where once you learn about it changes everything. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, RJ, sure. But no, he's 100% right. It does. Yes. Oh, and I just remembered one more little piece of housekeeping. I do want to say publicly if Dr. Dan from Creation Myths ends up watching this, I'm sorry I missed the 10,000K stream. He invited me onto a stream. I didn't realize it was happening that day. I didn't see the email. So I just wanted to say I'm sorry I missed it. Thank you so much for plugging my channel in the description, even though I was a flaky bad bean and I didn't make it to the stream. Thank you. That was very nice of you.
He stops by Saturday night at the Atheist. Yeah. So watch for him over there. He's a great guy. Yeah.
Yes. And a final thank you once again to my co-hosts and everyone in the audience. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned some new stuff. And you guys are awesome. I hope you have a great night and a great new week.
You rock.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
And
See you guys.